cover again exhibiting evasive behavior. Then we have a description of a boomerang-shaped UAP observed in a FLIR footage of the eastern coast of the USA. It rapidly decelerated and hovered as a stationary object. Then it suddenly emitted a light sphere from its central point, which expanded and partially engulfed the craft in a rotating sphere of light. We also have a mention of a jellyfish-type object crossing the US-Mexico border recorded in a FLIR footage. It exhibited cold and hot emissions and the shape of a flying brain or a jellyfish with hanging appendages. It flew against the wind, had no visible means of propulsion, and maintained an unnatural rigidity in its movements while flying at a low altitude above the ground. We have a mention of a supersonic range Fowler object intercepting a US Navy fighter jet off the eastern seaboard, with the object emerging from the clouds and approaching the fighter head-on at high speed, passing over the left side of the cockpit. Finally, we also have a mention of a tic-tac object detected by a space asset hovering near the local cloud cover without any reactions from the UAP, with the object tracked on purpose according to the report. Next, the document mentions human reports of first-hand encounters of anomalous objects as reported by the witnesses. There are records from 1991 all the way to 2022, and a list of craft types is provided, including spheres or orbs as the most frequently reported shape, from smooth to ones with visible appendages, suggesting a wide range of technologies or functions. Discs and saucers with and without domes were the second most common reported form, together with the flat saucers objects. Oval or tic-tac shaped objects were reported infrequently and only after approximately 2003, sometimes also exhibiting teardrop-like shapes. The tic-tac shapes sometimes have visible protuberances at the top or at the bottom of the craft. Triangles were the rarest of all observations in the data, and those were reported as equilateral isosceles triangles, sometimes with vertical stabilizers. The boomerang or arrowhead-shaped objects have a category of its own, followed by irregular or organic shapes, and those include the aforementioned jellyfish-type objects. Each of the categories also has a table providing a specification of their characteristics like size, speed, colors, signatures, and so on. The list of reports then provides specification of personnel type reporting, from flight deck crew through an F-22 fighter jet forced to land by a UAP formation to a sensitive facility breached by UAPs, not unlike the Langley Air Force Base report. We have the indication of bureaucratic reports indicating the OSAP and ATIP programs we know about in fair details thanks to Elizondo, as well as restricted historical records. The conclusion is the pinnacle of this document, though. It calls for disclosure and explains that those who are afraid of disclosure, or rather its consequences and impact onto the society, will never be able to predict the actual behavior of the populace in light of such momentous announcements. It calls for the end to the authoritarian solutions and unnecessary secrecy, putting faith in the good present in human nature. Be not afraid echoes calls for whistleblowers to come forth. And the document ends with a Latin phrase, scientia igne probata veritas perfidem, which can be roughly translated as science tested by fire, truth by faith, as if outlining the way forward regarding the phenomenon. I have included a link to the actual document in the comment section below, and I would like to encourage you to read it. It's quite an interesting read, regardless of its veracity or lack thereof. I believe that most of the content, if not all of it, can be considered as legit, as they coincide with other reports floating around in the UFO community. And what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. In the next video we will explore another topic touched by the last week's hearing, that of USOs or underwater anomalous objects. It would seem that the unknown, possibly guided by the hand of non-human intelligence, roams not only in our airspace. Thank you very much for watching this one. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot to me and keeps the channel going. Take care, and I will see you soon in another video. This week brought what could potentially be bombshell news. A geologist named Frank Kimbler claims he has found a piece of ultra-pure aluminium at the alleged UFO crash site in Roswell, New Mexico. This sparked interest as tests performed on the find in collaboration with Discovery Channel showed that the sample is 100% pure aluminium. Even our best industrial processes cannot achieve such a perfect purity, but only 99.999% at most. This could potentially indicate that the material found at the site could have come from a non-human source using superior technology. However, comparative tests performed at other laboratories apparently failed to confirm such high purity of the metal in the sample. Which is it then? Has alien material been found or not? The proof is not entirely conclusive, it seems. Perhaps the sample comes from a human-made source after all. The hunt for non-human tech continues. Hello everyone. Today we are returning to Wales, a place which is quite a busy part of the UK when it comes to UFO activity. A few weeks ago we discussed the Llandrillo UFO case, and today we are going to take a look at a case from 2016. On Friday, 26th of February 2016, residents of the outskirts of Cardiff, the capital of Wales, were disturbed by a chain of strange events unfolding. Approximately at 2 a.m, residents of Llandrillo started noticing a quickly increasing presence of military helicopters in the area. At least one of those allegedly landed on the public ground in the local area. These concerns were further amplified by the sightings of ground vehicles owned by the military. Not surprisingly, the local residents took it to the social media and alerted the local police. At least one resident spotted the helicopter to be a Chinook, a military machine flying low enough to have a rumble felt throughout their house. 6 miles away from Llandrillo there lies a normally cozy and quiet village of Penterk. Local residents who found themselves engulfed by the unusual activity quickly figured out that this was not exactly a regular military exercise though, and definitely not a usual one. Miss Cass Clark, together with others, posted their comments to Wales Online, an online newspaper, commenting that what they saw was and indicated that the military was chasing not a training vehicle or a dummy enemy helicopter as could be expected. There were mentions that the military knew they would come to the area, as there was allegedly a spotter plane present in the air for 2 days before the actual event, and what happened that night involved military planes chasing a green object. The aforementioned spotter plane circled around 6 red oval objects, which traversed the air in a pyramidal formation. Said objects were also seen hovering silently above the local fields before the arrival of the military force. Another local resident named Dave also mentioned that there were actually 2 spotter planes, with one replacing the other over the course of the 48 hours preceding the event. Dan and Kaz, already alerted by the spotter plane or planes, decided to camp the night outdoors, and approximately at 2 a.m. they noticed an E-3 Sentry military airplane, equipped with high-end detection and radar systems. At the end of the field close to where they were, they also saw a triangular shape formed by 3 red lights. It was allegedly one of the triangular UAP vehicles observed around the world, about which some claim they are a bona fide non-human technology, while others claim these are ARVs, or alien reproduced vehicles made by human hands. Those lights quickly increased in numbers, with now 6 lights visible along each side of the massive triangle. The lights of the leading edge were brighter than the rest. The vehicle took a turn above the tree line and ejected an object which looked like a green light, which started moving at massive speed, jumping around, with light intensity brighter than the moonlight and being the size of a small car. The object emitted thick lightning tendrils towards the ground. More orb-like ejecta followed, approximately 20 in number, forming a long line increasing in brightness the closer to the ground they were. The spotters noticed 2 American airplanes joining the fray. Those were big C-130 vessels. That prompted the pyramidal or triangular craft to turn invisible or vanish, with only the orb-like objects remaining visible. The military planes circled around them. The green orb flashed 3 strobe-like light pulses towards the planes, in what seemed to be like a decoy maneuver, eventually moving towards Llandrillo, as if trying to lure the military planes away from what we could possibly call the mothership at this point. As this happened, the location saw the arrival of 2 red barrel-shaped objects with what seemed to be a TV-wide noise-like effect, a 3-dimensional feature visible inside those objects. Moreover, one of those objects then also changed its color from red to green mid-air, and they eventually flew off into the distance. The observers followed into the field and saw more of the barrel-shaped objects. The C-3 planes were trailing the mysterious objects. Soon enough, 3 Apache helicopters flew in at a very low altitude. apparently in the direction of the green orb seen before. As Cass Clark went home from their observation in the field, she heard an enormous explosion sound coming from the direction where the green orb flew just a minute before. The explosion was loud enough to wake up the entire local area and car alarms to go off. It was further supported by a seismic anomaly recorded 45 miles away by a geological station at 4:20 am. The same explosion was also heard in Llantrisant, where it shook the Royal Glamorgan Hospital building. On the public land located at the outskirts of the town, there was a heavy military presence on the ground. Locals reported not one but two explosions, one happening mid-air and another caused by an impact in the local forest called the Smilog Woods. There is a video recording existing and it presents damaged trees in that forest with burn marks on the surrounding trees. The recording was made by none other than Cass Clark, who went to the area and whose hair turned white at the location. She also observed and recorded spongy, unusual snow falling at the crash site. She was able to squeeze the snowy substance with her fingers and it behaved like a sponge before it melted, just as expected of snow, but the whole behavior of the substance was a bit unusual. Meanwhile, the location in Pentirch, where the large triangular craft was observed, left a bold patch on the grounds where plants died. The strange snowfall was also observed there, just above that one specific field. Both those locations were studied almost 2 years later by the local world UFO researchers, as well as in 2019. The areas were electromagnetic hotspots with intensity much exceeding regular background radiation, to the point that normal exposure while walking there would be equivalent to an X-ray photograph. Trees at the Smilog Woods were cut and removed, allegedly affected by large disease, and replaced with newly planted ones. Further suspicious activity involved road closures throughout the area, including a section of the M4 motorway, which is a key thoroughfare in South Wales. When inquired about this, the authorities claimed either that the only reason for the closure was the tree removal operations we have just mentioned, while the military again invoked national security and stated that they cannot disclose any specific information. However, they never denied the presence of the strange craft observed that night. Moreover, the locations we discussed also saw the presence of ground military forces, with official explanation claimed to be tests for mobile communications and internet links being carried out in the area. Oddly enough, the ground forces were equipped with military-grade sturdy laptops, and some of the people present there were dressed in full forensic suits. The morning editions of the press saw a mention of the unusual activity in South Wales, and the official explanation provided therein was a military exercise under the name Chameleon, which was allegedly a regular and planned training. This note was supposed to quell the fears of the locals, but what happened was probably providing an explanation for people who lived a bit further afield. Those local to the area had a completely different experience after all. Not surprisingly, people started filing Freedom of Information Act requests, which did not yield anything. Information was withheld on the grounds of security risk. All that was said was that the explosion was simulated and was part of the Chameleon exercise. Despite those assurances, many people living in the area of Pentirch and Llantrisant still do not believe this to be a regular event, one which could be easily explained. Cass Clark was intimidated in the wake of her online comments, adding fuel to the fire of suspicion covering the case. What do you think, dear viewers? Did the UFO really crash in Smilog Woods in Llantrisant, having flown there from Pentirch and being chased by the combined Anglo-American Air Forces? Let me know in the comment section down below. Unless there are breaking news from the UFO community, next week we'll see another video on a UFO case. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching and all the support. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Hello everyone, in this video I would like to present a more coherent and actually thought out and planned summary of this week's UAP hearing before the US Congress. I wish I had the luxury of watching it with a completely blank slate as I did last year without prior interest in the topic, as my analysis would probably be even more objective then. Anyway, let's start with the Congress side of things. It is clear that there is a group of representatives who are fed up with the fact that Congress does not have proper oversight over the military-industrial complex and especially its budgets. The other very valid point is overclassification of everything related to US UAPs. It is widely agreed that while certain capabilities of both the objects and of the military should remain classified, the very fact that something intelligently controlled is out there and is most likely something involving non-human higher intelligence should be out there in the public. We are capable of handling the truth, and most people are okay with the thought we may not be alone anyway. The summary was very nicely put by Chairwoman Mays, who in her closing statement indicated simply that if UFOs, UAPs are not real, we are often told by the gatekeepers, why then there are billions upon billions of dollars spent on identifying, tracking and analyzing them. Something clearly does not add up there and seems fishy. And if there are indeed crashed craft and possibly bodies of their pilots out there, we should also know, as this may be one of the most important discoveries in our collective history as a species. Now to talk about witnesses, let's start with Michael Gold. Some people in the UFO community claim that his presentation boiled down to hinting NASA could use more funding. While this is technically the truth, it is also an oversimplification of things. As Mr. Gold pointed out, there are troves of scientifically valuable data out there which nobody really looks at, let alone analyzes it, even because of the sheer weight of stigma associated with the topic. Meanwhile, an honest approach to such data, weeding out prosaic explanations and leaving true anomalies to be subjected to more rigorous and detailed analysis should certainly be the way forward. An interesting remark from Mr. Gold also should have us think about the nature of the phenomenon. What kind of non-human intelligence we are dealing with? Is it biological, mechanical, AI, a hybrid, or a mixture of those? When it comes to Admiral Gallaudet, he clearly emphasized the dedication of the gatekeepers to keeping things under wraps, with his tale of deleted emails, the fact that the topic is not discussed even internally by the military commanders, even from the simple but so important angle of flight, aviation and marine safety. It also highlighted the fact that there are few to no roots soldiers wishing to report any anomalous encounters can rely on to get their stories heard and acted upon. We also heard quite the account of USO activity, with one torpedo-like object and another one exceeding the speed of nuclear-powered submarines by an order of magnitude. Even a brief glance should make us realize that those objects have capacities which are not currently within our reach because of technological and material limitations, most likely, even taking into account the fact that projects currently on the drawing boards are likely a few decades ahead in terms of their advancement. Now, where to start with Lou Elizondo? I believe he did rehabilitate himself fully after the recent fiasco with the UAP photo, which really depicted the chandelier reflection. And to be honest, his testimony exceeded my expectations. I was well aware that there is a lot of stuff he's unable to talk about. We already knew about it from the moment of the publication of his book Imminent. And yet there were numerous details and inferences which made his stand before the Congress very important. First, it could be interpreted that he was read into at least one very important special access program dealing with UAPs. Next, we got to know that there are biologics or bodies, if you will, in possession of the United States government and or private contractors, and that those bodies are most likely those of several different species or races, whatever we wish to call them. We also heard that crash retrieval programs are real, confirming the testimony of David Grush from last year. There was a confirmation that the objects observed around are too advanced to be man-made in any case, and there were likely many more nuances that I may have missed, and I will definitely rewatch his statement at some point in the future in hope of catching out more and more stuff that was said. I left the testimony of Michael Schellenberger for the last. His contribution was extremely valuable and kicked off strong with the notion that FOIA requests are very much missing the point, as they are sometimes almost completely redacted and contain very little to no information at all, let alone useful information. He also underlined the difficulties, if not virtual impossibility, of the whistleblowers to come forward with their testimonies with fear of reprisals hanging like a Damocles sword above their heads. He also underlined the willingness of the journalists to protect their sources and how important it is that they are often the one and only venue the whistleblowers can rely upon. But the actual importance when it comes to Schellenberger's testimony was in the documents submitted to the Congress. The report on the secret Immaculate Constellation program, which was included in the congressional record, contains some extremely valuable information, and there is a trove of information provided in his statement before the hearing, which includes 214 pages in total, including sources and citations. These documents are, in my opinion, important enough to warrant a separate video, which I am planning to release as the next one. So, now that the dust has settled, what are your thoughts about the hearing? Did it meet your expectations? Was it a flop? Did it fall somewhere in the middle? Let me know in the comment section down below. Myself, I am satisfied with it. I did not expect outright disclosures in terms of photos, videos, or actual specimens or the bodies or craft, but we got to know that high quality evidence exists and is hidden from the public, and many other important things. Thank you very much for watching and for all your support. It keeps the channel going. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I will see you very soon in another video. Take care. Hello everyone. In this video we are taking a look at a mysterious message some claim was left to us by aliens or non-human intelligence. In this particular case, the message was allegedly encoded in a crop circle. First, let's say a few words on the crop circle phenomenon itself. The term started appearing in early 1980s when people observed strange geometric patterns of relatively large size appearing around in the fields, usually of cereal plants, although grass has also been observed as the circle material. The peak of popularity of those structures was probably around early 1990s when two gentlemen named Doug Bauer and Dave Charley, being at a respectable age, took credit for creating over 200 of such structures across England. Some people point out that these structures could not be created by two elderly guys running around at night with cumbersome contraptions they apparently used to flatten the plants. Especially on short summer nights, creation of complex geometric patterns in poor artificial lighting with such precision as we can see in some of the pictures seems very much impossible. Not to mention that the phenomenon was described as early as late 17th century already. In some cases, the circles seem to exhibit traces of radiation, which would be characteristic for UAP activity, thus suggesting an alien origin of the phenomenon. The crop circle we are talking about today appeared on 15th of August 2002 in Hampshire, in the south of the UK, close to a local radio tower. We can see it in the picture on the screen right now. The picture seems to depict what is a typical grey alien holding a disc, with what is claimed to be a binary message encoded in it. To the left of the figure there is a depiction of three dots, which align to the Orion's belt visible in the night sky during the winter, or the colder part of the year. The message was allegedly decoded by a gentleman named Paul Vigay, and it seems to read as follows. Much pain but still time. Believe. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. Let's try to unpack the message. The general consensus seems to be that the grey alien depicted here would be a representative of the alleged Orion Empire, reported by some experiencers, usually associated with the stereotypical grey aliens and possibly evil according to human morality. It would be the same species which has landed in the 1950s in the US and allegedly met with President Eisenhower, with the meeting eventually leading to a treaty with this NHI, which the American administration later came to regret. The good part of the message is often referred to the more benevolent alien races of NHIs, varying from visitors from the Pleiades cluster, also known as Tallwhites or Nordic aliens, or from Sirius and other various star systems. Though as NHI are also reported to have created the so-called Galactic Federation, mentioned by the former Canadian Minister of Defense late Paul Hellyer or Haim Eshed, the Israeli Space Force commander. Much pain but still time. This is open to interpretation. Some people claim this refers to abductions carried out by grey aliens, others mention the alleged unfavorable treaty with the same species. The Galactic Federation we have mentioned would be the ones opposing the pain and the deception, having the good of humanity in their interest. Now we also come to the gift parts from the deceivers. The theory concerning the treaty entered into as a result of the meeting at the Holloman Air Force Base suggests often that the grey aliens were allowed to carry out abductions of humans in exchange for technology, which was given in quantities lower than expected and was never really reverse engineered at levels as useful as the human side of the treaty had expected. There is another side to the gift part. We have heard some people, just to name Professor Diana Pasulka, mentioning crashed UFOs as gifts or donations made to humanity so we can progress technologically rather than actual crashes. On a related note, there exists another theory which says that in 2027, which is the 80th anniversary of the famous Roswell crash, the same species which has lost a craft and comrades in New Mexico back then is going to return and reclaim what was taken and which is held by the secret UFO program, the bodies and the remains of the crashed saucer. The conduit closing part is usually understood twofold. The first interpretation is simple, the end of transmission. The conduit was closed, the crop circle completed. The other interpretation hints that the time window for communication and possibly for help from the good aligned aliens may be running out and soon will be closed, and it is up to us to ask them for their help. Even more fringe theory says it has something to do with a possible rapture-like event, during which those believing in good aliens will be saved, while the rest of the humanity will fall prey to the false messiahs and their darker plans. Is this story true? Believers point out to the mysterious death of Paul Vigay, the guy who has deciphered the crop circle message. He was a sort of an early computer prodigy in the 1980s as a teenager and continued to work as a computer technician into the late 2000s. His private interests included the UFOs, poltergeist activity and other occult phenomena. Vigay was reported missing on the 19th of February 2009 and was found dead the day later. The police failed to clarify whether he died as a result of an accident or whether it was a suicide. He split up with his girlfriend the night before he died, leaving a note saying "I love you" with a telephone code and computer passwords. According to the British Telegraph newspaper, his death was deemed to be a mystery by the coroner examining his death. His website still exists, and if you want to, you can visit it by clicking the link in the comment section below. The mysterious death would match other deaths of people who happen to have stumbled upon profound UFO-related mysteries, such as John Mack, the famous psychiatrist from the Harvard University studying the aftermath of the 1994 mass UFO sighting in Zimbabwe, who died in a car accident often considered to be very suspicious as well. People claiming there to be truth point out that several technologies we use today may come from past UFO crashes, and these claims include inventions such as transistors, memory materials, carbon fibers, lasers, Kevlar, stealth technology used in aircraft, and so on. People who do not believe this entire story point out that the decoding could simply be conjured out of thin air, and the death of Paul Vigay being a suicide, which is quite frankly an actual possibility too, and the entire interpretation are just an attempt to add a meaning to the entire story, which has no base in reality whatsoever. What is your opinion on the case, dear viewers? Let me know in the comment section down below. I myself remain slightly skeptical here, but then again, stranger stories surrounding non-human intelligences and UAPs circle around, some of which have been reported before the US Congress in publications such as the French Cometa report or by the Brazilian Air Force. I am keeping an open mind and hope that we get a more convincing clarification of the case in the future, one way or another. I continue to keep my eyes on UFO news, but the traction seems to slow down now, other than David Grush being now officially employed by Representative Eric Burleson as his advisor, and Apple adding one more disclosure-themed movie to the list of titles expected in the foreseeable future. Unless something changes, I am planning a slightly longer video next week, dedicated to the infamous Colares UFO event in Brazil. Until then, thank you for watching, stay safe and warm, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon in the next one. Take care. Hello everyone in a new video on the channel. Today we are going to take the first look at the phenomenon of alien abductions. As we will hopefully discover along this journey, the phenomenon itself is much older than many people realize, but for the sake of the narrative we are going to start with what is possibly the best recorded and attested encounter of such kind. The rumored abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, which was heard about by many people, including those not explicitly interested in the phenomenon as such. The alleged abduction of Betty and Barney Hill took place on the night of the 19th to 20th September 1961. The couple were traveling through some rural areas of the state of New Hampshire, returning home from holidays. To provide some background here, the couple lived in Portsmouth in New Hampshire. Barney was 39 at the time of the experience and worked with the United States Postal Service and was an active member of the civil rights movement. Betty was 42 at the time and was a social worker, also involved in the civil rights movement. The couple were well respected in their community, including their religious community, and widely considered to be solid and reliable people. The incident took place en route from Montreal and Niagara Falls to the couple's home. South of Lancaster in New Hampshire, Betty noticed a bright point of light moving across the sky between the moon and Jupiter. While she initially thought it may be a falling star, the upwards motion of the objects quickly dispelled the thought. The objects started moving erratically and became visibly bigger and brighter, which prompted Betty to ask Barney to stop the car and take a better look at the object, which he did. As they stopped, Betty observed the object through binoculars and noticed what she dubbed an odd-shaped craft with flashing and colorful lights. She concluded it may be a flying saucer, an object her sister observed a few years prior. Barney also took a look through the binoculars and at first sight thought it's a star, a satellite, or an airliner flying towards Vermont. He also changed his mind, and rather quickly as the object rapidly changed its trajectory and seemed to approach the couple, descending as it did. Barney decided the best course of action would be to resume driving while the two continued to observe the object. As they did, the object became big enough in the visible field for Betty to conclude it was about 40 feet or 12 meters long and seemed to be rotating while flying. It continued its erratic motions across the sky. Approximately 1 mile south of the Indian Head Mountain, the object quickly descended and moved towards the Hill's vehicle. This maneuver had Barney stop the car in the middle of the highway. The craft stopped mid-air above the car at an altitude of about 90 feet or just short of 30 meters. Barney mentioned later it resembled a massive pancake. As Barney was armed with a pistol, he bravely took a few steps forward and closer to the object. He noticed the object was manned and hosted between 8 and 11 humanoid occupants seemingly looking at him. All those occupants except one moved to the rear of the hallway in the front part of the craft. The one remaining occupant communicated with Barney telepathically, saying, "Stay where you are and keep looking." Barney also recalled that the beings wore what looked like black uniforms and black caps. He also seemingly somehow knew that those beings were not human. The craft then descended to about 60 feet or 20 meters overhead and about 90 meters away from the couple. Barney felt like he had to return to the car, claiming the beings are going to capture them. What followed was a blank space in the memory of the Hills, who regained their senses in the car. They continued their journey home, pondering what had actually transpired. Upon arriving home, a series of unusual occurrences followed in the wake of the strange event. Betty wanted to keep their holiday luggage near the rear door of the property and wanted to dispose of extra food left over from the trip, while Barney discovered the strap of the binoculars became torn without him ever recalling this happening. The toes of his shoes were also scratched. The watches of the couple also refused to work. They decided to take long showers in case of any potential contamination. While showering, Barney felt an urge to check his private parts, though he did not discover anything unusual. The Hills concluded that something really strange has happened and tried to recollect the events as they happened. They did recall a buzzing sound at the encounter location, and after that sensation they failed to recall anything in detail, remembering just fragmented pieces of the event. This made they decided to catch up on sleep. After a few hours, Betty awoke and placed her clothing and shoes she had on the night before into the wardrobe. It was then that she noticed that her dress had a tear at the hem, zipper and lining, and moreover it was covered in some sort of a pink powder which blew away as she moved the clothes around. The Hills car showed concentric shiny circles on its trunk. As advised by a friend of Betty's sister who was a physicist, the Hills brought a compass close to the newfound pattern. The device went haywire every time it was in the proximity of the odd lines. This activity subsided over time. Being perplexed, the couple decided to seek for help, or at least a listening ear. They conducted a long interview with Walter Webb, a local astronomer who confirmed the testimony to be most likely truthful and reliable, except for minor details, and as such discrepancies which could be easily ascribed to stress. 10 days after the strange encounter, Betty started experiencing vivid dreams for 5 nights. This occurrence never returned again, but seemed to trouble her. The couple started a dream journal in November. In one of her dreams, the Hill saw a roadblock and men who surrounded their car. Betty dreamed that 2 small men were forcing her to walk in a forest at night, with Barney being led behind her. As she called his name, Barney was unresponsive, as if sleepwalking or hypnotized. The men guiding the couple were about 5 feet tall or just there, dressed in blue uniforms with caps resembling military attire. The skin of those beings was grey, although their general visage was largely human. As they also sought medical help, more details seemed to come to light. The Hills recalled that their journey felt longer than it should have been, but upon such a closer analysis it turned out they experienced missing time, and their journey took about 7 hours instead of 4. They also did not recall the 30-ish mile stretch from the point of their encounter. The doctors they visited suggested hypnosis, and although Barney was initially not too keen on it, he agreed as he thought it might help Betty deal with her strange dreams. The hypnotic session was eventually conducted by Dr. Benjamin Simmons. During the session, Barney reported that the binocular strap tore while he ran from the strange craft to their car. He now also recalled driving away from the spot, but he also felt compelled to drive off the road and into the woods, where the couple saw 6 men standing on the dirt road. There the car stalled and the men approached the Hills. Barney mentioned one of the men having a cap with a visor, looking like a commander of the group. Barney described the beings similar to how Betty did. The men stared into his eyes with a mesmerizing and entrancing effect. He mentioned those beings as being in his brain. Betty recalled the beings communicating in English, while Barney mentioned they mumbled in an incomprehensible language. The messages he understood were transmitted via thought transference or telepathy. The craft had fin-like wings and red lights. Betty's session yielded a different order of events and slight differences in the description of the technology they saw, but the events themselves were described consistently by the couple. The doctor conducting the session deemed the memories to be a psychological aberration. Initially, the Hills omitted the details of what seemed to be medical examinations on board the craft carried out by its occupants. Betty was told not to be afraid and that the beings wanted to conduct some tests. The couple were separated and Betty was asked questions about her lifestyle, with the beings apparently not understanding words referring to food products and could not comprehend the concept of time. Hair, skin and nail samples were collected from her and she was scanned using a rod, including many needles connected to a wire, which was in turn connected to some kind of a machine. Her navel was punctured with a 6-inch long needle in what was apparently a pregnancy test. One of the beings pulled on her teeth and asked why Barney's teeth came out and Betty's did not, to which she explained that Barney used dentures. Betty asked for something she could prove the encounter with, and the leader allegedly gave her a book with alien writing in it. However, the book was taken away from her, and after an argument, the beings decided that the memory of the event should be wiped away in the Hills. The part was apparently a recollection of Betty's dreams. Barney's examination seemed to be much more traumatic. In addition to his dentures being removed, he was also subjected to an internal examination per rectum and a sample of his genetic material was collected as semen. If you find the audio recordings from the hypnotic sessions of the Hills, which are available, Barney's recollection of events sounds genuinely and extremely traumatic, including panicked screams and evident experience which was painful both physically and mentally. This single fact alone could explain the suppression of memories of the event. Afterwards, the Hills resumed their lives and generally did not seek clout with their experience. They did, however, accept the occasional meetings with UFO researchers and shared their experiences with family and friends. Their story was eventually published in 1965 by the Boston Traveler newspapers and by the United Press International Agency, which made the Hills garner international recognition. In 1966, John Fuller wrote the book The Interrupted Journey with cooperation of the Hills. The book also mentioned that Betty was shown what seemed to be a sketch of a star map aboard the strange craft. This map was later analyzed in 1968 by an amateur astronomer, Marjorie Fish. She concluded that the map overlaps onto a section of the night sky, indicating the double star system of Zeta Reticuli as its key element, leading to an implied conclusion that this was the home location of the visitors. This map, eventually sent to the Astronomy magazine, was deemed to be incorrect by scientists. However, it opened a debate regarding UFOs in the magazine. The map itself was also later dismissed by Carl Sagan in 1980 and deemed inaccurate according to more precise star observations in 1990s. When it comes to the hills themselves, Barley passed away early, unfortunately, aged 46 in 1969 due to stroke. Betty never married again and continued to enjoy a status of a celebrity in the UFO circles, eventually passing away in 2004 at the age of 85. What actually happened to the hills then? Was it a legitimate encounter with otherworldly visitors, or was it a hoax? People who have tried debunking the hills over the years indicate that big elements of their story could be ascribed to psychological factors. Barney was a World War II veteran and displayed symptoms of the condition diagnosed today as PTSD. He also experienced racism, and the couple, being interracial, was not exactly a typical one in early 1960s. The compounded chronic stress combined with sleep deprivation and travel fatigue were supposedly behind the misperception of an aircraft guiding beacon as a UFO craft. Several years after the event, Betty was also shown photographs and live images of lights generated by natural and human-made sources, and she apparently mistook some of those for UFOs, which also seemed to match the claimed inability of the hills to distinguish an actual non-human craft from prosaic objects. Other claims also hint at the fact that the reported memories of the hills may have been influenced by the content presented at the time in the Outer Limit TV series, which often enough covered the topic of potential extraterrestrial visitors. On the other hand, those who believe that the hills have actually encountered an otherworldly craft and visitors point out the ability of the couple to provide a generally matching recollection of events under hypnosis provided separately, their lack of initiative and actions aimed at gaining any personal fame or riches from their story, as well as the consistency with many other reports of alleged alien abductions, the symptoms of missing time, telepathic communication, the apparent ability of the non-human beings to be able to almost freeze a person and make them obedient to commands and suggestions, which are now a staple of statements provided by many abductees. Have the hills managed to tap into some subconscious current of thoughts and imagery common for all of humanity, or have they indeed had an objective experience of a close encounter? This is a thought I would like to leave you with today, dear viewer. In the next episode dedicated to the abductions, we will take a look at the case of Travis Walton and see if there are any similarities and contradictions compared to the case of the hills. However, the next video will be dedicated to one of the alleged crash and retrieval operations regarding UFOs or UAPs. Until then, look up to the sky and remain vigilant. Hello everyone, first and foremost a few words regarding the future of the channel. Going forward I will be posting videos in English only. I reached the decision with a bit of a heavy heart, as I would like to continue being a bilingual channel, but at least for the time being it is an unsustainable solution and an unsustainable form for me. I hope I will be able to post a video in Polish now and then, or on something related to the country, but most videos from now on will be aimed at English-speaking audience. With that out of the way, and as I have mentioned in the last video, today we are going to talk about various alleged alien races or species visiting the Earth and described by experiencers of close encounters with such beings. Let us start with what is likely the ultimate classic, the image which is most commonly invoked when mentioning aliens these days. One of the, if not the, actual first mention of the beings known as small greys was a part of the alleged abduction story of Betty and Barney Hill, which took place in 1961. The couple returning from holidays was reportedly abducted by beings which the abductees described later under hypnosis. According to their description, the beings were not human in nature. They were diminutive and stood at perhaps 5 feet tall at most, and wore what was either a uniform or they had a peculiar-looking bluish-grey skin. They reportedly had eyes which could look directly into one's soul. Betty Hill was also shown an image of shining points, which was later identified as a possible star map. When overlaid on the physical star map of the sky, the map indicated the key location as the binary star system of Zeta Reticuli, located almost 40 light-years away from the Earth. While the story presented by the Hills propelled the image of the small grey aliens into the prominent light in ufology, there were reports of similar beings earlier chronologically. Bodies of similar beings were reportedly found in the Aztec UFO crash of 1948, and this report was also likely conflated with the Roswell incident of 1947, which is now commonly reported as involving dead grey aliens who were present on board the craft which had crashed near Roswell. The imagery of the grey aliens was further popularized by the book Communion, written by an experiencer Whitley Strieber and published in 1987 as a non-fiction piece. The same beings were also reported in 1998 in France and rooted themselves in the French-speaking UFO community. The 1990s saw the rise of the alleged links between the small grey aliens and the New World Order conspiracy theory. In 1995, a video presenting an autopsy of a possible grey alien was leaked, but was proven to be a fake video. However, the creators of the video mentioned that they based it on an original video which showed an actual autopsy of a dead alien being found in one of the crashed UFO. Small grey aliens are probably the species or a race most frequently reported by the experiencers. They also seem to be behind the majority of alleged abduction cases. A prominent feature of these reports are the eyes of those beings, which they seem to use to exert mental influence on the abductees, while they perform various procedures on the abductees. And while there are psychological explanations behind the sightings of those beings in traumatic situations, they are explained as memories from the earliest childhood of a newborn perception of mother's face. People who came face to face with the beings are more than likely to confirm, however, that these beings are real and exist in flesh. Others think that the small greys are not exactly extraterrestrial, but possibly interdimensional in their origin, that they may be time travelers from the future and our evolutionary descendants. This theory was popularized thanks to the alleged interview with a captive grey alien held by the American military, a link to which I will post alongside with this video. There are at least two interesting curiosities related to small greys. The famous English occultist Aleister Crowley reportedly contacted an extra-dimensional being. It called itself Lamb and was drawn by Crowley in a report from one of his occult rituals, which we can see on the screen right now. The drawing seems to present a being roughly similar to the grey alien image which is widely known. Some people claim it is just a hallucinatory impression recorded by Crowley. The being seemed to be cold and computer-like in its intelligence. Another curiosity involves the Nazca mummies found in 2016-17 in Peru and widely presented to the world last year, which seem to bear some semblance to the stereotypical image of a grey alien. Short stature, humanoid build, fewer digits than humans have, and so on. Speaking of morphology, the grey aliens are usually reported to have 3 or 4 fingers on their hands and between 3 and 5 toes. They are often reported to smell horrendously, emitting a smell similar to that of ammonia. The reasoning some propose says that as the beings seem to lack the typical sexual and excretory organs, they expel waste through their skin instead. The height of those beings in reports varies from anywhere between just over 3 feet or 1 meter to almost 5 feet or 150 centimeters. Another feature related to the small greys is that they seem to be more frequently described as being malevolent, although possibly unintentionally, than benevolent, and that they seem to be drone-like, possibly linked into what may be a hive mind linking those beings. Rumored autopsies and other leaks from people who allegedly worked on biological alien material claim that the small greys are not exactly alive as we usually think of the term, but are possibly bioengineered beings and maybe just biological vessels for either consciousness of the actual aliens, thus making them just biological avatars, or that they may be a form of a biological AI. And while outlandish, these claims could possibly explain why UFO crashes involving those beings, according to the reports, are very rarely followed by any kind of a search and rescue operation carried out by similar craft. In addition to the claims already presented, experiencers have reported over the years that there seem to be at least 2 and possibly 3 different types or species of the grey aliens. In addition to the small greys standing at 3 to 4 feet, we also encounter tall greys, as said, standing at about 5 feet. And while the smaller greys seem to be more robotic or drone-like, the larger ones seem to be more independent and self-reliant, possibly in charge of the smaller ones. The alleged third type of the greys may come from a different location. It is also not too unusual to hear about the grey aliens having a slightly different, greenish or even reddish hue to their skin, with the latter variety being reportedly observed in Brazil and in South America in general. including the famous Virginia case and possibly the Maggie case. It is also worth noting that beings similar to the Greys, dubbed Little People or Ant People, are a part of the folklore of the Americas, from as far north as the modern southwestern US to the southern Brazil. The second most popular and best known type of alleged alien beings is the so-called Nordic alien. They bear the name as they resemble the stereotypical image of the Scandinavian people. The Nordics are tall, taller than humans on average, and by approximately 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Most of them have pale complexion, blonde, golden, or even white hair. There are instances of Nordics with darker hair and darker complexion as well, although these are relatively rare. People who have experienced and met the Nordics often say that the race seems to be at least neutral and often benevolent towards humanity. Malevolence is likely rare and seems to be as rare as the counterpart of explicit benevolence observed in the Greys. They seem to be extremely spiritual, to the point some people see them as magical beings. Personally, I would not be too surprised if some potential visitations in the past could be mistaken for angels because of the visual descriptions of this particular alien race. While the Nordics seem to be capable of speech, they prefer telepathic contact, and while they do so, they communicate in a language understandable to the human they talk to. The rumored writing of the tall whites seem to resemble Egyptian hieroglyphs. They also seem to be a long-lived race, and once they reach adulthood, they seem to be visually locked at what a human person would look like between 27 and 35 years of age. Some experiencers claim to have been aboard the crafts piloted by the Nordic aliens and being taken for a tour of the solar system. There has been at least one example of a military meteorologist in which a human being made friends with a Nordic family after helping a child of this species out of a thorny bush and befriending the grateful parents. The messages conveyed by those beings indicate some form of care for humanity and/or perhaps for the Earth as the whole ecosystem. Some people claim they guide our spiritual development and help us become better people, less focused on violence, greed, and generally materialistic attitudes. Other alleged involvement of the Nordics, sometimes pointed out by the experiencers, includes genetic manipulation of our own species, perhaps assistance with lifting us on the evolutionary pathways. Since we look quite similar, some people also posit we may come from a shared evolutionary lineage. As we know, Homo sapiens DNA carries genes from at least one unknown ancestor yet to be discovered, so it is easy to see why claims of the Nordic involvement with us are even a thing. When it comes to their origin, the most frequently place indicated in space is the Pleiades star cluster. Personally, I find it a little odd, as Pleiades are a very young star system in general, and life developing to that level in such a cosmically short period of time is not too likely, but then again, who knows? Other locations I have heard indicated by the American Admiral Byrd, who toured Antarctica in the 1940s, claimed that these beings, matching the description of the Nordic aliens, were residents of a secret city located under the ice sheets of the Antarctica. Other rumors also claim that these beings have cooperated with the Nazi regime, which could contradict their generally described peaceful and rather non-intrusive nature. In part 2 of the video, we will take a closer look at a few other alien races. The reptilians are quite a popular rumored alien race. Despite their fairly prominent popularity, they are not too frequently reported by the experiencers. They are usually considered to be a malevolent race, with its main intentions being gradual corruption of the human society and takeover of control over the human elites. On top of that, the reptilians are also allegedly conducting an extensive genetic manipulation program, with their possible goal being the creation of human-reptilian hybrids and eventual complete control over the human race. The more extreme views portray reptilians as a race which is planning to eventually execute a full-scale culling of the humans, perhaps leaving a token population compared to the levels of today in total enslavement and subservience to the reptilians. The idea that the reptilian aliens are behind our human elites has been popularized by the British conspiracy theory author David Icke, who claims that the vast majority, if not all, of human royal bloodlines and people in the positions of power come from bloodlines and families which are either reptilian hybrids, and sometimes people are even substituted by actual reptilian aliens themselves in those families. This leads us to the rumored characteristics of the reptilians. In addition to their natural lizard-like appearance with scaly skin and quite characteristic eyes with vertical pupils, they seem to be in control of and are able to use advanced mimicry, being able to pose as humans if they wish to do so. Following the same logic, they would be more susceptible to cold than humans are, and are generally more cold-blooded than we are. As we have mentioned, they are usually, if not almost universally, considered to be malevolent. As regards their origin, they seem to hail from the constellation of Draco, with the star system of Alpha Draconis most frequently indicated as their origin. Other sources indicate their presence in the belt of Orion and possibly in the Rigel system in the same constellation. While the tall Nordics are most human-like of the races we have discussed so far, the Mantid beings are the least human-like. They are one of the more frequent races allegedly encountered by the experiences, including abductions. Some people claim to have come into contact with mantid-like beings under the influence of psychedelics, especially DMT. The typical representation of a mantid alien being mentions a bipedal insectoid creature, usually much taller than a human being, standing at approximately 8 feet. They are often dressed in long robes, rendering their appearance a scholarly touch. Despite their non-human appearance, the mantids seem to be extremely wise, intelligent, and knowledgeable. They seem to be one of the most technically developed, but also one of the most spiritual alien races out there. They are also allegedly an extremely old race, and the combination of all these traits is said to make other alien races often take a stance of deference towards the mantid people. The mantid aliens are often experienced surrounded by small greys, who seem to be their assistants, possibly android beings created to fulfill various tasks of their insectoid masters. The mantids are patient and relatively benign, and they seem to be content with imparting people with knowledge of various things, especially the abductees who are invited aboard their craft. They do not seem to bear malicious intent towards humanity, and neither are they particularly benevolent. It is possible that if they are an extremely old race, the notions of human morality are something they left far behind in the past. The small blue aliens are creatures encountered by an experiencer and a writer, Whitley Strieber, his wife and friends. Those creatures were also portrayed in a movie titled Communion, based on experiences and a book written by Strieber. They are short beings standing at about 1 meter and are of a rather stocky stature. According to one lady who encountered them, she described them, "You are so ugly," as they resemble elderly people with wrinkled skin. Those beings seem to be interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial in nature, and it is a mystery as to where they exactly come from. The visitors, as Strieber called them, are not particularly interested in the physical side of life and in the body of human beings. They seem to care, however, for the spiritual development of human beings, and according to Strieber, they seem to be tightly wound into and are related to what happens to humans after we die. Perhaps they act as a kind of hypnopomps or even psychopomps, namely guides who lead human souls into the afterlife. All of these are only conjectures, of course, and there is no guarantee whatsoever as to their intention and role. Those beings seem to appear wearing robe-like attires, often with hoods, and have invariably dark blue skin. They are reported to show some telekinetic abilities and can communicate telepathically. Their attitude towards humanity seems to be neutral to mildly benevolent. The year 2024 saw the publication of a scientific paper titled Extraterrestrial Life in the Thermosphere, Plasma's UAP Pre-Life Fourth State of Matter by R. Joseph et collaborators. You can find the link below. In this scientific paper, the authors consider the possibility of plasmas, namely structures formed in the upper atmosphere and above it. Those structures behave like quasi-life forms, resembling multicellular organisms. There are bits of natural speculations that go one step further, claiming that if this is the case, there is nothing that would technically prevent even sentient plasmoid and non-corporeal life forms to exist in the universe. Following this logic, some people in the UFO community started to claim that perhaps many of the so-called spirits the practitioners of the occult supposedly have come into contact with may as well have been some kind of such beings. The most outlandish of such theories involve even more complex mechanisms like quantum entanglement, which would potentially enable non-corporeal beings to come into contact with humanity and other life forms across practically unlimited distances across the universe. The few selected more popular alleged alien races presented above are just a fraction of all the reported beings people have come into contact with. Depending on the source, there are claims of any number of between 4 and over 100 different species or races of otherworldly visitors spotted on Earth thus far. And just as there are many reports, there are as many supposed allegiances, places of origin of the beings, hierarchies, and characteristics. Perhaps the notion proposed by the veteran of UFO research Jacques Vallée holds the most merit. He does not claim to know what kind of an intelligent design is behind the phenomenon. He does, however, claim that the phenomenon seems to have a trickster quality to it and that it hides behind the many faces we can and do observe. From craft which varies in terms of its shape, size, and apparent function, through the visual appearance of the visitors, down to their displayed abilities and qualities. The only certain thing that we can say is that, to paraphrase a saying, the phenomenon is not only weirder than we supposed, it's actually much weirder than we can even suppose. In regards to the next video, I originally intended to cover the alleged alien abductions, especially the perhaps best known and documented case of Betty and Barney Hills. However, recent weeks have brought in some very interesting developments which I will be quite eager to present the next time we meet. Until then, take care and do not forget to like, subscribe and share the video if you enjoyed it.
Čudno nema oča. Šta je to, Bog te? Ko? Jebote, šta je to? Evo, nije zajeba.
There are literally dozens of drones flying around. You can see the lights flashing. It's hard to see them. iPhone camera.
Shit. Oh, yeah, you can see that little... Damn it! So there's one little light, flashy light, bright. I mean, it's not flashing, I don't know, but there was another one. It might be coming here. They're moving really slow. Okay, hold on. Yeah, you see it? That one started where the other one was, and then that second one, the bottom right, just popped up. Like, what the fuck is that? I wish I could see, but I can't see that far. Stay here, hold on, buddy. What are those, man?
It's not on flight radar. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
It's rotating. It's rotating. Holy shit. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I've got to follow it. Oh my God. It turned my flashlight on. Where the hell did it go? There's another one. Fuck. It's turning my flashlight on. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? Oh my God. What the hell? Oh. Still going. Come back. It's over there. Oh. Oh. There's gonna be another one.
I just looked at the flight radar app and there's nothing over the house right now as far as aircraft. That thing is not making any noise. The noise of the airplane is behind me. That is silent. That's not making any noise.
What the fuck?
So just got back. If you can hear Jack's running up and down, he's going crazy again. But this was stationary, and the blinking's not consistent as an aeroplane. I can't hear any aeroplane noise whatsoever. It's not consistent. So if I can get a perspective of how high it is. There's a house there, as you can see. This thing was stationary for ages. To me, that flashing looks like Morse code. Consistent white. It stopped flashing, it stopped moving. Tell me that ain't something strange. Go on, tell me. Tell me it's just an aeroplane. Because that was flashing. Now it's stationary and not flashing. Yes, I know, I'm using my phone.
Yo, what the fuck, babe? There's so many of them. What the fuck? Just wait. There's more. There's another one. There's one over here. Right there.
I believe in God, but I do not believe in Bible. I don't think you're going to okay.
went outside to prove my point, and this is over my house right now. What is that? What? Let me just scan around and find another one, because it seems like there's always more than one. They've been off more to the southwest, which would be back this way. And sure enough, you can see one blinking in the distance, going left to right. And I told you I'd find 3. Let's see if my camera can pick it up. It's just to the left of this thick tree. Yep, right there in the distance. There's another one. Let's go back out front.
Instagram, what's that? Look, hold on, let me stop walking. What's that? That's a plane? Why it ain't moving? Then what's his little homie back here? That's a plane? Why it ain't moving? Look at that, it got 4 lights on it.
Komisches Flugzeug. What the hell? Was ist denn das? What the hell? Und wie schnell das zieht, ne? Komisches Flugzeug.
This week brought what could potentially be bombshell news. A geologist named Frank Kimbler claims he has found a piece of ultra-pure aluminum at the alleged UFO crash site in Roswell, New Mexico. This sparked interest as tests performed on the find in collaboration with Discovery Channel showed that the sample is 100% pure aluminum. Even our best industrial processes cannot achieve such a perfect purity, but only 99.999% at most. This could potentially indicate that the material found at the site could have come from a non-human source using superior technology. However, comparative tests performed at other laboratories apparently failed to confirm such high purity of the metal in the sample. Which is it then? Has alien material been found or not? The proof is not entirely conclusive, it seems. Perhaps the sample comes from a human-made source after all. The hunt for non-human tech continues. Hello everyone, I decided to title today's video Are We Ready for the Wool? The title was dictated by the recent series of interviews with people who claim to have been participants to the UFO crash retrieval program aired on the News Nation TV station, with Ross Coldhart interviewing them. The group, currently assembled as the Skywatcher team, ready to observe and record UAPs using various sensors and techniques, came forward with their testimonies which, quite frankly, rattled the UFO community quite a bit. You may ask why. The alleged whistleblowers did describe the nuts and bolts part of the phenomenon, at least 2 types of retrieved craft and an alleged triangular mothership as well. But their strongest claims came from what is usually considered the other side of the UFO coin, the metaphysical realm. The chief person which came forward in that group, named Jake Barber, made his statements first. As a quick recap, during one of the alleged crash and retrieval operations, he came close to the recovered craft, close enough to be within 50 feet according to his recollections. He was overwhelmed by intense emotions which included a mixture of perfect unconditional love, sadness and awe. His descriptions aligned quite close to the description of experiencers presented by perhaps the best known modern UFO experiencer, Chris Bledsoe, who claims to have met a non-human intelligence he calls the Lady, who evoked the same feelings in him. At least one of the current wave of whistleblowers also reported similar feelings during one of his encounters. What is curious about these experiences is that in all those cases the experiencers came into contact with what was perceived as feminine energy of being. Quite frankly, especially with the case of Chris Bledsoe, the experience was fairly, if not quite, similar enough to what is often reported as Marian apparitions, especially in the Catholic faith. The exception here is that the lady Bledsoe met had the symbolism associated rather with the Egyptian goddess Hathor. She was accompanied by a semi-translucent bull, rather than Virgin Mary. This also made me think of a proposal brought forth by the veteran ufologist Jacques Vallée in his books, according to whom the experiences of the 3 Portuguese children in 1917 who have claimed to have met the Virgin Mary, followed by the Miracle of the Sun event the same year, may have been a series of events potentially initiated by the phenomenon we tend to describe as UFOs. The same loving and yet sad energy, motherly but at the same time drenched in misery over our human condition and its downsides, as well as the darker sides of humanity. The claims of the most recent wave of whistleblowers entering the realm of the paranormal did not end here, though. They claim that special forces of the US, including those involved in secret programs and 3-letter agencies, use teams of people with psionic, or psychic if you will, capabilities. Those people are allegedly performing what sounds essentially like the High C or C5 protocol, that is, human-initiated contact with non-human intelligences. Cutting a long story short, these people enter a deep meditative state, very much a trance, and in this state they are able to act as guiding beacons to UFOs, which manifest at the physical location of the team. This has been known before, and while in the past these claims were firmly believed in by a part of the UFO community, shunned by some, and yet accepted as a possibility by others, the story presented by Jake Barber and company goes much further than that. They claim that in addition to being able to summon the craft, the psionic assets, as they say, are able to invite the UFOs to land at the location. Allegedly, this was how some recoveries happened in the past. But the craziest part to this particular story happens next. The claims say that the ability of the psionics goes further and allows them to actually pilot UFOs. So you can see where this is going. While the UFO community is generally fairly open-minded, to say the least, by the virtue of the topic it engages with, when it got exposed to a wild claim like that, a storm erupted in discussions. Some people, especially those with experiencer status and experiences of their own under their proverbial belts, tend to lend some credence to the recently presented claims, especially that the Skywatchers group now promised us to show an actual and full coverage of an event during which they allegedly summoned a UAP and a dogfight in the skies followed. If proven, their veracity would receive an enormous boost. However, a big chunk of the community dismissed them as hoaxers and grifters just wanting to earn some money off the recent UFO craze, and in the worst case scenario, disinformation agents. Well, when it comes to the grifter part, this suspicion is rather unsubstantiated. Jake Barber himself is a millionaire with several successful enterprises running. When it comes to the disinformation agent part, well, that is an argument that nobody is really able to deny, confirm, we can only contest it, I guess. The credential of the whistleblowers seem to check out, but the fact alone does not preclude their continuous involvement in government control of the topic at large as well. The Skywatcher program has officially launched its YouTube channel, and reports from the UFO summoning adventures were released to a mixed reception from the community at large, as far as I can tell. Let us go back to the Wu issue though. The erupting discussions show something interesting. It seems that most people interested in UFOs are perfectly fine with non-human craft entering our skies, possibly crashing and being collected for reverse engineering and other purposes. The possibility of dead bodies of the pilots or even live aliens being found is not universally rejected either. However, the more unorthodox claims are where the problem lies. We are conditioned from the moment we are born to operate in our logical cause and effect and three-dimensional reality. The claims of psionics being able to control UAPs, possibly sentient craft, and so on, are something in and of a completely new league altogether. That said, that point of view is also something quite specific for the widely understood Western society. There are parts of the world, for example Native American tribes, parts of South America and Southeast Asia, where either belief in non-human entities and psychic powers in humans is prevalent and accepted very much as a fact by many people, if not the majority of the local populations. We have still only scratched the surface here. In addition to the claims I have mentioned, the topic of metaphysical goes further. We can be dealing with possibly higher dimensional beings and craft here. We may be talking of entities often referred to as angels or demons. Some say the aliens may as well be lowercase gods, simulation caretakers, and so on. Now you can see why the topic is so problematic. If those claims were at least partially true, it would mean that our understanding of reality and our place in it is not just incomplete. In fact, it would mean that our understanding of reality is largely incomplete and extremely limited. Where do I personally stand on the issue? By now I have largely accepted the physical part of the phenomenon as being extremely probable, including visitations, craft flying in our atmosphere, and so on. The piling up evidence is becoming harder and harder to refute. As to the metaphysical side of things, I cannot say that I am a strict believer, especially in that I am not an experiencer myself. But I also keep an open mind, as the phenomenon seems to be weird by default. We well know that our science and understanding of reality around us is incomplete, and I stand by the general scientific view. The reality is what it is, and we can only accept it as it is. If it is just physical, so be it, but if we have missed something spiritual and which is also real, who knows, maybe the claims of people like Chris Bledsoe, Jake Barber, and others are also true. And what do you think, dear viewers? Let me know in the comment section down below and we can share the thoughts and discuss things. In the meantime, I keep my eyes on the news, including drones, Nazca mummies, and so on, while also thinking more about videos about more or less known UFO cases from the past. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and until then, stay safe, take care, and I will see you soon in another video. Hello everyone! After a flurry of news rolling through the month of January, I thought it would be a nice change of pace to take a look at one of the historical events rooted in ufology as a staple. As we know from history lessons, on the 7th of December 1941, the Empire of Japan attacked the American port of Pearl Harbor, which led to direct involvement of the USA in the Second World War. Today we are taking a look at a home defense event which remains unexplained to this day. During the conflict, America braced itself for possible attacks, of course. The West Coast in particular was deemed vulnerable to strikes due to the operations of the Japanese fleets on the Pacific Ocean. It was the night of 24th February 1942 when the air raid sirens went off in the city of Los Angeles. The Office of Naval Intelligence issued a warning of an impending attack within the next 10 hours, and the alerted defense facilities reported flares and blinking lights in their field of vision. That evening alert lasted from about 7 to 10-ish p.m. that night. After a few hours of peace and quiet, the alert was issued once again, and this time the sirens were heard throughout the entire county at 2:25 hours on the early morning of February 25. The military authorities imposed a total blackout in the area, and full-scale military readiness followed suit. At 3:16 a.m. the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade stationed in the city opened fire at an aircraft reported in their area of operation. 12.7mm air defense machine guns and 12.8-pound anti-aircraft shells filled in the night skies, their explosions lighting up the air. A total of over 1,400 shells were fired that night, with the cannonade lasting a full hour. The fire caused damage on the ground, with 5 civilian deaths, 3 caused by car accidents in the blackout and 2 by heart attacks due to stress. Buildings were damaged by the falling debris from the anti-aircraft shells. The entire event was reported in the news across the entire country later that same day. What caused such an alarm in one of the biggest American cities, though? The Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, provided an explanation a few hours after the event, during a press conference. According to him, the entire event was a false alarm triggered by anxiety and war nerves. The Army put forward an explanation that the accident was caused by a false flag intelligence operation and the use of commercial airplanes as an act of psychological warfare. However, many people did not believe this to be the actual cause of the events. This notion was further bolstered by the admission of Japan after the war, who stated that there was no action from their side over Los Angeles that night. The uncertainty and speculation around the event led to an official investigation in 1983. This investigation claimed that the massive artillery fire was initially caused by a balloon firing a red flare just after 3 a.m., which in turn triggered panic. As the anti-aircraft batteries opened fire, the exploding ordnance lit up by searchlights from the ground were simply taken for enemy aircraft, causing a domino effect. That said though, people in the UFO circles focused on a photo published in Los Angeles Times on 26 of February 1942, in the aftermath of the night shelling. It shows searchlights focused on a group of objects which some ufologists claim to be exactly that, UFOs operating with or from a mothership, which then would be the actual target of the entire affair. Let us pause here and think for a moment. Would that be possible? While there is no evidence other than said photo pointing out at the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement, some of the usual hallmarks of UFO sightings do check out in this case. Firstly, UAPs or UFOs are often drawn to military activity and human conflict in general. Such instances have been described as far back in time as BC reports coming from ancient Rome, for example. Secondly, the west coast of the United States is universally considered to be one of the hot spots on the UFO map of the planet. Some of people with alleged insider knowledge, most notably and recently the veteran lawyer Dennis Sheehan involved with the UFO whistleblowers, put forth claims that there is a possible underwater UAP base located near the US-Mexico border in relative proximity to Los Angeles. The entire area is also not that far away from one of the best-known UAP encounters in recent history, the 2004 Nimitz incident. Obviously, the evidence in this case is not as direct and not as strong as in many other encounters. However, the Battle of Los Angeles found its place and some very strong supporters in the UFO community, and thanks to them it has become a part of the wider UFO lore. What do you think about it, dear viewers? Was it a simple accident that led to the shelling, or was there perhaps indeed a non-human visitations involved? Let me know in the comment section down below. At this point, I'm yet unsure as to what the topic of the next video will be. I am tempted to take a look at the situation with the drones, with recent sightings and strong signals from eyes on the ground in the northeastern US and in Denmark, when one of the key airports in Copenhagen was temporarily shut down due to drone activity. Then again, we also still have many cases from the past to look at, such as the Pascagoula incident, for example, as we have not touched the topic of abductions for a long while. If there is anything specific that you would like to hear about, let me know. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, thank you so much for all your support, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in the next one. Take care. Hello everyone, instead of a new video about a UFO crash, a piece of news that dropped out of nowhere today is covered in this video. I am sure that many people remember February 2023 when 4 objects were shot down in a relatively short period of time over the North American airspace. One of those was confirmed to be a balloon, but the nature and identity of the remaining 3 objects was never confirmed. One of those objects was shot down over the province of Yukon in the north of Canada on February 11th. It was shot down by the combined NORAD forces. It was already interesting that the object was not shot down by the Canadian F-18 Hornet fighter jets, which were closer to the trajectory of the objects, but by American F-22s instead, using an IR-guided missile. A part of a reason behind this may lie in the speculation that F-22 are the one well-guarded airborne platform able to carry missiles with warheads able to trigger EMPs, or electromagnetic field pulses. Such pulses, whether natural or deliberately generated, are said to be able to take down UFOs or UAPs, or at least disable them, just to name the most famous UFO crash in Roswell in 1947. Then we also had a memo sent by Canadian administration staff to the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau several weeks after the shoot-down event itself. The memo still mentions the object as a UAP, which would indicate that despite the time frame since the shoot-down, the authorities and/or the military have not identified the point of origin, the nature, and the capabilities of the object. This could indicate an anomalous object, as figuring out an aerial platform controlled by another nation would be relatively simple. Moreover, the memo mentions the object being seized by the US forces, which currently try to exploit the object and learn its purpose and potential military capabilities. Today saw a posting of an article by the Canadian CTV news website, which shows the first publicly available photo of the downed object. The picture was released through a Freedom of Information request. The image itself was apparently initially approved for public release, but the publishing was held back because of concerns that releasing it may lead to more questions and confusion. The initial report said that the object was a cylindrical metallic balloon with a tethered payload below it. The released picture was apparently taken from an aircraft flying below the object, but this has not been confirmed. Anyway, here is the picture. The release of the picture was also initially possibly held back by the fact that the US engagement was allegedly also required for the release. CTV News managed to obtain what seems to be a grainy picture, possibly a photocopy of an original document sent by email. According to the news outlet, the image and the document containing it were provided by a civil servant who wishes to remain anonymous, 18 months since the initial FOIA request. The object known as UAP-23, or the 23rd UAP object observed in 2023, allegedly remains in the US custody. The news triggered a flurry of activity in the UFO community, with fairly few people believing the object to be a balloon. Someone found a UAP sighting video from South Korea in 2014, which presents an object possibly similar to the one downed over Canada last year. See the link in the comment section below. What do we make of this video then? I personally agree with the assessment of the military presented in the release document. The picture does raise a plethora of questions. I am not an aviation expert myself, but I yet have to see a man-made craft of that shape and with such characteristics. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. I will keep an eye on the topic, then I will see you soon in another video. Take care. Hello everyone, in this video we are taking a look at another classic of ufology, a close encounter with an unidentified flying object mid-air. It was the night of the 18th of September 1976 and the location was Tehran, the capital city of Iran. Residents of the northeastern part of the city observed a multicolored aircraft hovering at an altitude of a few thousand feet in the air around 10:30 p.m. Some of the people have called the local airport to report the object, and they managed to contact Hussein Piruzi, the night shift superior supervisor at the airport, who confirmed the sighting at around 11:15 p.m. as he went out to take a look. Through binoculars, he saw a bright object with flashing lights changing position. He estimated its altitude to be approximately 6,000 feet. Having observed the object until 12:30 a.m., Piruzi alerted the Iranian Air Force. The commander at the post, Deputy General Nader Yousefi, also confirmed the sighting and in response ordered an F-4 Phantom II interceptor aircraft airborne to investigate the object better at 1:30 a.m. This aircraft, piloted by Captain Aziz Khani with First Lieutenant Hossein Shokri, flew from the Cherokee Air Base westwards. The two military men managed to approach and then get close to the object, only to experience the radio system in their jet, as well as the onboard instruments giving up completely. When Khani pulled the aircraft away, the functionalities returned. 10 minutes later, at 1:40 a.m., another interceptor aircraft piloted by the squadron commander Major Parviz Jafari with First Lieutenant Jalal Damirian was ordered to start pursuit of the object. Jafari managed to acquire the object on the radar at a distance of 27 miles. The radar response indicated an object the size of Boeing 707 or KC-135 Stratotanker. A visual sighting was reported as an object with intense red, green, orange and blue lights was seen with the lights forming a diamond shape. The object itself was too bright to have the man discern its actual shape though. As Jafari started his approach to the strange craft, the target suddenly took a turn to the right, followed by another turn, at an approximately twice the angle compared to the first turn. Jafari then observed the smaller object detaching itself from the larger one and heading straight towards his interceptor at high speed. Convinced that this is some kind of a weapon which was fired, Jafari pulled the trigger intending to fire off his short-range air-to-air AIM-9 Sidewinder missile. The missile was never fired though. The weapon's control panel malfunctioned and prevented the armament from being used. The radio and other instruments on board the Phantom also stopped functioning. Jafari turned the plate to the left to avoid collision with the smaller object, which made an approach to approximately 4 miles, but then stopped. The smaller object then returned to the larger one, which in turn released another small light object, which descended to and eventually landed on the ground. At this point the pilot was ordered to head back to the base, but was escorted there by one of the lights on his way home. During the final approach to the airbase, Jafari spotted another light flying at low altitude in front of his plane. Ordered by General Yousefi to take a look, he did so, only to experience the same radio and instrument malfunction within 4 miles of the shining object. Jafari broke off and managed to land with the luminous object disappearing from view as he did. The following day, the same 2 men who had the close encounter with the object in the second run, so Jafari and Demirian, flew to the area where they observed one of the small objects landing on the ground using a helicopter, but their inspection yielded no results. According to the base commander, General Abdullah Ghazer Barzin, all the military records related to the event were handed over to the US Air Force, as we must note here that at the time Iran was still ruled by the Shah and it was before the religious revolution of 1979. The US Air Force insisted that out of the entire documentation, only a memo from an interview with the pilot survived. However, the Defense Intelligence Agency rated the event as one of high importance, and the area was apparently tracked by satellites in the aftermath. Interestingly enough, the Tehran incident was one of a small series of UFO sightings which covered the entire part of the world, from Iran to Morocco and Portugal, over a period of 1 week. Parviz Jafari continued to serve his country and eventually made it to the West after the revolution in the late 70s. He went on to become a retired Air Force general and spoke about his unusual encounter during various meetings, conferences and interviews in the media, one of which you can find in the links in the comment. He strikes most viewers as a genuinely nice and honest person. His character is also reflected in one of his mentions of the Tehran incident, during which he had said that the biggest regret of his career was to pull the trigger on the UFO, attempting to hit it with a missile. He mentioned that had he had the opportunity to relive the encounter, he would try to engage the strange object peacefully instead. Many people consider this to be one of the well-documented or at least well-witnessed UFO events involving radar and visual sightings, and who are usually considered high-trust witnesses as well. And what do you think, dear viewers? Was it a genuine UFO encounter and non-human intelligence which showed its force without actually causing harm to its opponent in the air? Let me know in the comment section down below. In the meantime, stay warm, stay curious, look up to the skies, and I will see you soon in another video. Take care. Hello everyone. In a bit of a twist compared to the recent content on the channel, I thought that it could be a nice change of pace to expand a bit on the wider UFO related lore. While I focus mainly on the nuts and bolts side of the phenomenon, as it is much easier to observe and hopefully measure and quantify it, we are going to brush against the woo side of things today. The starting point for today's video may be the famous 1977 movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where extraterrestrials, modeled after the stereotypical Greys, land and establish contact with humanity on Earth. The title of the movie itself refers to the so-called Close Encounters scale, which includes usually 4 but sometimes 5 or even 6 stages. Close Encounters as a scale have been introduced by the famous UFO researcher and Project Blue Book scientist Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Before the Close Encounters proper, Hynek posited 3 other stages, with stage 1 being nocturnal lights observed in the sky, Stage 2 being daytime UFO sightings, and Stage 3 being a combined radar and visual observation, which is a much more rare phenomenon and involves mainly airports or military facilities. To classify as a close encounter proper and a C1 on the scale, a visual sighting of an exotic object must take place at an apparent distance of less than 500 feet or approximately 150 meters away, which enables significant angular extension of the object and details being noticed. CE2 is the next step on the scale, and this already includes physical interaction. These often include interferences with electric or electronic devices, most commonly observed as car engines stalling, radio distortions, electronic devices such as mobile phones behaving erratically, and this includes the inability to take sharp photographs or photographs at all, down to animal reactions, hidden discomfort, symptoms similar to mild irradiation, imprints in the ground, vegetation scorching, and so on. CE3 is a situation in which the observer has full visual contact with living or at least animate entity who is a non-human, that is humanoid, robot, or android beings who are the occupants or pilots of the UFO. In 1990, Jacques Vallée, a disciple and a collaborator of Hynex, expanded the scale with 2 further stages. According to Vallée, CE4 includes alien abduction and thus direct and physical and/or mental interaction with non-human entities. He also argued that this type of interactions include transformation of perception of reality, which results in the often reported jumbled memories, dreamlike or hallucinatory states of the experiencers. Vallée also added CE5 to his scale, and in his interpretation this was an after effect of a contact between humans and non-humans. Such consequences reported in the ufological literature include mainly injuries or healing, and in rare cases alleged paranormal psychic or psionic abilities, like limited telepathy, increased level of empathy, and often non-sensory forms of perception. Another definition of CE5 saw the light of day following the one proposed by Vallée. This definition is most commonly known as propagated by Dr. Stephen Greer, famous for his 2001 UFO conference in Washington, D.C., which was one of the first cases of this type and an event which popularized UFOs at the time. He is also noted for having become a point of contact for quite a substantial number of witnesses, both military and civilian, and whistleblowers coming forward with their revelations. According to Dr. Greer's school of thought, CE5 is instead a human-initiated contact with extraterrestrial or wider non-human entities. His practices incorporate the elements of spirituality, especially that of Hindu and Far Eastern origins. Dr. Greer has developed a special program, also known as the CE5 protocol, the practitioners of which claim to be successful in establishing contact with non-human beings. In the standard version, it is recommended to practice the protocol in a group because of the shared intent to establish contact. The participants are encouraged to try and initiate contact outdoors, preferably as far away from the noise of civilization as possible. They sit down, often in a circle, and begin meditation. The meditation starts with entering a deep relaxed state, one which I understand is similar to practices of Yoga Nidra. Once this is achieved, the person wishing to contact the other reaches outwards with their consciousness, expanding it higher to the Earth's orbit and eventually beyond. According to the non-local theories of consciousness, it should be both possible to reach out indefinitely far away in this way, and to combine it with practices of vectoring or creating a guiding beam similar to the hemisync techniques of the Monroe Institute, and this is followed by the transmission of the intent to contact benevolent non-human entities, especially ones that can and will then manifest to the participants, including thanks for their time and shared love for the reality around us. People vouching for this CE5 protocol mention success. You can find many reports of people seeing weird lights in the skies, possibly flying objects matching the standard 5 observable criteria, as well as strange orbs similar to plasma or ball lightning and poltergeist-like activity. In rare cases, the meditating people receive what they claim to be telepathic communication from their interlocutors. On the other hand, skeptics of the practice claim that during resorts organized by Dr. Greer, someone once observed a plane dropping flares in the area where the meditation took place, hinting at the hoax behind the entire practice. So, all of this begs the natural question, does CE5 actually work? I honestly cannot tell. On the one hand, it does sound quite implausible, but on the other, there are many people who tried this protocol alone and in groups and report a success. There are even rare cases in which a similar idea was used during a live televised event and also seemed to invite strange orbs flying around at the location. My personal thoughts on the matter are that it is an interesting idea and one which should not hurt to try at least. In some ways it also reminds me of some occult practices, namely of evocation of spirits of various kinds by the magicians who try to establish their own contact with what would effectively be non-human entities. Perhaps they have been on something for millennia, who knows. I admit that curiosity took the better of me and I have tried the C5 meditation myself. I have not stuck to the protocol fully to the letter, that is, I have not tried it outside. I have not seen any craft scenes or strange lives to myself, so in that regard I have not achieved any full results. But that said, I did have two extremely vivid dreams. The first one had me in a park during summer where about 15 to 20 small saucer-shaped probes swarmed around me and seemed to scan me with intent. Now and then they stopped, and when they did, I heard telepathic messages inside my head. The other dream involved a part of the night skies, where clouds parted and revealed what looked like an almost never-ending stream or an armada of UFOs of all possible shapes flying, not unlike cars driving in their lanes on the motorway. Perhaps it is down to the person and their belief whether C5 fully works, or to what extent it works. Is it a psychological phenomenon, or is there an objective, tangible component involving brushing against non-human parts of reality to it? I will leave the judgment of that to you. If you wish to try C5, you can follow an example guided meditation by Dr. Greer, a link to which can be found in the comments below. In the next video, we will return to the nuts and bolts sides of the phenomenon again. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I will see you in another video very soon indeed. Hello everyone! While I was thinking about the topic for the next video, it dawned on me it would be in order to touch upon the very subject which gave rise to the channel's name. But before that, I would like to thank everyone for your support, subscriptions and likes. It means a lot, keeps the channel going and brings disclosure one step closer. And speaking of disclosure, this is going to be the topic for today. So let's start from the very beginning. What does disclosure mean in the context? The word itself means to reveal, to present something to the world. And this is how most people interested in UFOs understand it as well. Disclosure, as we mean and understand it, does indeed mean the official announcement that we are not alone and that intelligent sentient life exists, and we are at least aware, if not in direct contact with it. For many people in the so-called Western world, the notion of disclosure is usually associated with the imagery of the President of the United States of America going in front of the White House in Washington and making the official address to the nation and the world that contact with an alien civilization has been established. For others, and here the most obvious pointers hint at either China or Russia, it means another major power making the very much same announcement on their own. Yet other people with a bit more global view consider international organizations, with the United Nations being the highest order of those, technically speaking, being just the right vehicle for speaking on behalf of the entire humanity at such a crucial moment in our collective history. Now, having said that, why has the topic become so popular very lately? The notion of disclosure of alien life has been on the proverbial menu for decades now, at least since the famous Roswell UFO crash which allegedly took place in 1947. And the accompanying wave of UFO sightings across the world. There were several times in our history where the notion of disclosure was seemingly within reach. Some claim that both Kennedy and Khrushchev planned to make the disclosure in early 1960s. Others believe that Apollo missions have encountered UFOs and were the perfect trigger for disclosure. Yet others consider the address made by Ronald Reagan in 1987, in which he hinted that nothing could unite humanity as much as an extraterrestrial threat. Several US presidents and candidates were pointed as potential disclosure presidents, with Hillary Clinton virtually revealed as such as a candidate in the avalanche that were the WikiLeaks and her emails with government advisor John Podesta. I would say that there are two reasons why disclosure may be closer than ever before. For the first time in history, American military has publicly acknowledged they have UFO, UAP videos recorded and that there is no explanation behind them. Those videos were published by New York Times in 2017. This was further fueled by UFO and USO sightings by the military in 2019, and even more so by the shoot-down of the 4 UAPs over North America in 2023. Then again, we also had the UAP hearing before the American Congress in July 2023, almost a year ago to date, and the Schumer-Rand amendments of 2023 and 2024 to the National Defense Authorization Act. The further private and scientific initiatives pushing for disclosure like never before, and they operate in the face of a growing mountain of evidence and veritable people coming forth with their testimonies. The other direction which may lead to disclosure and which is also slowly priming us for such is the field of science. The launch of the James Webb Telescope in late 2021 opened completely new avenues. Those involved the study of exoplanets orbiting distant suns. It is now considered not so much if, but when does the telescope stumble upon signs of extraterrestrial life. Such signs may include biosignatures, namely the presence of gases characteristic for life and resembling the composition of our earthly atmosphere, hinting at life as we know it possibly being present on the surface. One such example is the recent discovery of the K2-18b exoplanet with possible traces of dimethyl sulfide, a compound considered to be a biomarker for life in its atmospheric spectrum. On the other hand, the giant telescope could also be able to detect giant objects of extraterrestrial origins, such as Dyson swarms or spheres, and perhaps starlifting operations taking place in the space. One last thing worth mentioning here is the increasing availability of relatively cheap and thus accessible equipment in the hands of the public. So many of us have cell phones with sometimes amazingly good quality digital cameras. Even with how difficult UFOs are to observe and record, as my video on the 5 observables shows, many people claim it is just a matter of time and luck until someone records, even by accident, a really high quality video depicting an otherworldly craft and releases the video to the public. As we can see, as long as there is indeed an intelligent non-human design behind all the UAP observations, we seem to be bound for disclosure as a matter of time. And given the implications of it, it may be one of the key moments for humanity as a whole. It begs the question, how should we approach disclosure? There are two main lines of thinking and approaches to the idea of disclosure. People usually refer to those as controlled disclosure and catastrophic disclosure respectively, with possibly the same final state, but with completely different scenarios leading to it unfolding. But as this video is getting long, we are going to touch the two disclosure scenarios into follow-up videos. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe and share, and I will see you in the next one. Take care! Hello everyone, in this video, part 2 out of 3, we are going to talk about the so-called controlled disclosure in more detail. Why controlled, what is its purpose and objective, and what can we expect from it. But before that, I would like to thank everyone for your support, views, likes and subscribes. In part 1 of this trilogy, we talked about disclosure of non-human intelligent life as such, and we have mentioned two types of potential disclosure scenarios, controlled and catastrophic one. As things stand, the observed course of events and the potential road leading into the future towards the disclosure efforts seem to hint at the controlled disclosure scenario as the one currently developing. Where to begin then? I personally believe that a slide from a presentation provided by Colonel Carl Nell during his 2023 Seoul Foundation speech is a good starting point. We can see it on the screen now. According to many people involved in the UFO circles and research, the disclosure effort, or at least the current iteration of it, really began with the 2017 publication of declassified US DoD videos depicting UAPs, the now famous Go Fast, Gimbal and Nimitz UAP videos. Since the American Department of Defense confirmed these videos to be legit and the origin of the objects visible in those videos as unknown in terms of their origin. This was chronologically followed by the 2018 Jellyfish UAP video published by Jeremy Corbell and the 2019 Puerto Rico UAP USO video showing an object submerging into water, exhibiting transmedium motion and splitting into two. Another key development along this line of controlled disclosure was the 2023 UAP hearing before the US Congress, followed by figures holding senior military ranks and positions, just to name the aforementioned Colonel Carl Nell or Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, coming forth and also claiming non-human intelligence to be real, visiting our planet and so on. Soon enough, according to the claims of Representative Anna Paulina Luna, we are going to witness another congressional UAP hearing come September or October this year. All of this seems to be a part of a concerted effort driven by and spearheaded by some figures very well known in the UFO UAP community, just to name Dr. Gary Nolan, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Dr. Kevin Knuth, Dr. Diana Pasulka, Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo and others. Carl Nell presented the general timeline of this likely scenario of disclosure of non-human intelligence to the world. As we could see in that slide, Phase 1 has been very much completed at this point. We have demonstrated the existence of unknown objects exhibiting all the properties of intelligent design behind them, but without a known point of origin thus far. Whatever data sources are available have been analyzed within our capacity. We have generated hypotheses regarding who and what we may be dealing with. The governments across the world, just to name the American DoD, France, Brazil, as well as Mexico and Japan to an extent, have acknowledged or at least accepted the possibility of intelligences interacting with us on a somewhat regular basis. Phase 2 of this scenario, which I believe may be somewhat off schedule as we are already in the second half of this year, involves mainly further studies, analysis and acceptance by the academia. This has been achieved to some extent between the efforts of Professor Avi Loeb studying potentially extraterrestrial materials, studies on the Nazca mummies and the recent discoveries fueled by the JWST telescope. The notion of life existing outside the Earth has been accepted by a substantial part of researchers dealing with such topics, and also expands to other fields of research, from physics and biology to psychology and religious studies. Thanks to the SALT conference event, which took place this year, the possibility of non-human intelligence and its technologies have been introduced to the world of finance and big money as well. As the stigma accompanying UFOs is slowly eroded, we are also entering concurrently Phase 3, public acceptance. The The number of people willing to speak about their experiences, including military and civilian pilots, public figures in the fields of academia and politics, has been steadily rising. The notion of UFOs, UAPs, while still somewhat times ridiculed, is also treated much more openly than ever before in the media, and the approach is turning into one between mild curiosity and serious openness to the idea that we are not alone. Phase 4 of controlled disclosure is much more difficult. The main objective of this phase is to determine the nature of the phenomenon, and quite frankly this may be the most difficult part of the entire process. Jacques Vallée, who is definitely among the most knowledgeable figures in the field, clearly says that despite having spent nearly 6 decades dedicated to the study of UAPs and NHI, he is still unable to tell who or what we are exactly dealing with. The phenomenon is highly elusive and almost trickster-like in its nature. UAPs are notoriously difficult to observe, let alone record with veracity and reliability, allowing more serious data analysis. One of the key elements of this stage is the acceptance by the Five Eyes Alliance, so the US, Canada, the UK, Australia and New Zealand. Of all 5 countries, the US has likely made the most progress in this direction, while my own country, the UK, still officially does not acknowledge UAPs as an issue. In terms of phases 2-4, there are many actors pushing for disclosure in one way or another. From people like you and me learning and spreading knowledge about the UAPs and non-human intelligence, through people like Ryan Graves approaching the phenomenon from the point of flight safety, through scholars like Vallée or Diana Pasulka, who incorporate the more obscure and spiritual aspects of the phenomenon, to many people reading subreddits and other sources of information about UFOs. The progress is there, but it is still stymied by the powers that be, which seem to be unwilling to blow the proverbial lid off. More on that in the next episode dedicated to catastrophic disclosure, or by people simply afraid of what we may potentially be dealing with. Nevertheless, we seem to be moving forwards, even if at a glacier's pace sometimes. As we could see, the final phase of controlled disclosure involves scientific discoveries, proper oversight over technology, and potential interaction with the intelligence behind the phenomenon. It also implies a seamless transition to a post-disclosure world, one in which the future generations grow up with the awareness of us not being the only sentient life in the universe, as common as the use of mobile phone by the youngest members of our society right now. The key figures behind the disclosure movement seem to hint that this is the best course of action. They seem to point at potential and the unpredictable consequences of the so-called catastrophic disclosure and try to avert those. Others yet claim that this is the road to nowhere, and catastrophic disclosure, whether by our governments or by the non-human intelligence itself, is the only way to proceed forwards. The next video dedicated to catastrophic disclosure and its potential consequences will hopefully provide you, dear viewer, with some insight, and I hope it is going to be helpful for you to decide which course of action is the best one. Should we keep going as we are, deciphering the possibly greatest mystery humanity has ever faced step by step, or should we rip the proverbial cord and let the truth breach the floodgates? In the links below you can find Carl Nell's presentation for the Soul Foundation I have mentioned earlier, and a link to a white paper containing disclosure-related recommendations for the British government, just to outline that the issue is serious and actually considered at serious levels. And until then, thank you very much for watching. If you like the content and would like to see more, please like, subscribe and share. Your support is what keeps the channel going, and I cannot thank you enough for it. See you in the next one. Hello everyone, in this final chapter of this mini-series dedicated to the disclosure of non-human intelligent life, we are going to cover catastrophic disclosure, explaining what it actually is and what would the consequences of it be. But before that, thank you all for your support, it is extremely appreciated. I think that a good starting point for the discussion of catastrophic disclosure is its definition provided by Colonel Carl Nell, whom we have already mentioned several times in other videos. As we can see on the screen, it would be a sudden, unforeseeable and complete revelation of the existence of non-human intelligence, but either such beings themselves or by an adversary, which can basically mean any of the major countries on Earth, depending on the point of view. But is it really that simple? After all, the revelation itself, while definitely right down the alley of some of the most important discoveries humanity could consider, does not sound overly catastrophic as such. As surveys shows, about 60% to two-thirds of people in the Western world believe that intelligent life exists somewhere in the cosmos. so turning the belief surely wouldn't be as catastrophic and damaging as it may seem. Add to that the general acceptance of non-human beings in the folklore of places like South America, the existence of jinn according to Islam, or the fairly quiet but still approval of the possibility by the Catholic Church. So, would it be really that bad? First, we should consider the fact that humanity as a whole tends to behave irrationally when facing unprecedented challenges, just to remind us of the early stages of the pandemic in 2020 when people mass bought out toilet paper out of all things. But even with that in mind, we should also consider the fact that there are several scenarios of catastrophic disclosure and quite a handful of potential consequences as well. People who are whistleblowers or have been otherwise involved with the alleged UFO, UNP, NHI related projects often mention severe consequences faced by the humanity as a whole in the case of catastrophic disclosure. Let us mention just a few of those. What has been mentioned is the collapse of our economic systems for the starters. Either combined with that or as an alternative, there may be massive social disruptions and possibly even the decomposition of society as we know it. Carnell himself compared one of the possible outcomes to the infamous Bronze Age collapse, where nearly all ancient civilizations went under due to a combination of factors. But what could drive such a drastic outcome? One of the possible scenarios says that the governments know that the aliens are coming our way and that they are not benevolent. Some voices say that they observed the behavior of some UAP objects, especially monitoring our military and nuclear capacities, indicate a recon-type activity. In terms of potential invasion, given the displayed abilities of objects such as the Tic Tac one encountered by pilots from USS Nimitz in 2004, there is quite frankly little the governments and the military could do to protect us. And what good is a government which cannot protect us after all? It is easy to see the catastrophic consequences of this scenario here. Next, we have the potential aftershocks of releasing information pertaining to the alleged crash and retrieval program combined with efforts aimed at reverse engineering of non-human exotic tech. Here we have the options of laser mining, a technology rumored to have been successfully recreated to a minor degree by China already. The UFO community has heard about the alleged novel propulsion systems being in development by the US, able to carry nuclear payload to any place around the world in half an hour, according to some scientists. Warp drives, or the ability to travel to other solar systems, as well as advancement in other fields of technology such as medicine, genetics, and so on. Last but not least is the field of energy. The UAP objects require immense energy to behave the way that they do. If solutions such as cold fusion and ultimately zero-point energy, or tapping into the energy contained in the vacuum of space itself with nearly endless and free energy were suddenly available, imagine the backlash related to hiding all of such endeavors over the most of the last 80 years. It would seem that the military-industrial complex has hampered the progress of all humanity for its own good. Oil and gas industry would be gone in an instant. Stock markets crashing would send the global economy and eventually society into total collapse. And one major power mastering alien technology could create such a shift in the power of geopolitics that world balance as we know it could just cease to exist. Then there is also the danger of releasing the equivalent of a hydrogen bomb in terms of energy into the hands of the average person. Not everyone will be willing to put such power to good use, sadly. The next important point is to consider is religion. All over the planet, many and actually most of humans believe in some form of a supreme being or force guiding us. The existence of non-human intelligence, especially one that possibly tinkered with our own design as a species via genetics, could possibly wipe all of human beliefs overnight. If aliens were our creators, the Abrahamic paradigm would be immediately gone. Perhaps Buddhism would be the one view surviving such a scenario relatively intact, and even atheism would be put into a serious doubt as a philosophy with the physically manifested creators being around us. There are other, even more outlandish theories related to human spirituality. Some people, including experiencers, claim that Earth is a prison planet and aliens thrive on our emotional energy, especially the negative one, which would mean that they guide us towards ever-present suffering, wars, and other forms of hate and its consequences. Near-death experiencers and abductees also hint at the possibility that the tunnel of light phenomenon and the deceased relatives welcoming us in it is nothing more than a ploy of aliens who collect our souls and recycle them via reincarnation to perpetuate the cycle of suffering, very much in line with the Buddhist philosophy, although with a completely new twist and angle to it. Even more terrifying is the thought that we may be nothing more than a simulation project run by aliens who exist in either more dimensions than we do or come from a completely different parallel reality altogether. Should something like this be revealed, especially combined with the reincarnation hypothesis, this could possibly lead to a mass wave of people ending their lives in hope of quite literally respawning in better circumstances, not unlike characters in a video game. Now that we have taken a look at just a handful of possibilities, from the more realistic and mundane ones to those really far off into the realms of the so-called woo, it is really easy to see that catastrophic disclosure suddenly released onto humanity could lead to all kinds of problems, which would be way beyond the control of any institution humans have created, be it national or international. So, much as many of us would want the disclosure to happen, and still some claiming that going down the catastrophic disclosure route is the only way to actually achieve it, maybe it is either better to let the sleeping dragons lie, at least for now, and gradually prepare humanity for the big day. And what do you think? Should we aim for disclosure at all, and if so, should it be controlled or catastrophic? Have your say in the comment section, and we could have an interesting discussion, hopefully. Thank you all for watching the video and the mini-series. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.
Laser beams.
There's people flying fucking drones. The fuck are those? What is going on here? Those just flew out from that building. Those fucking drones? What the fuck is going on? Do people see this? Those just flew out from behind that fucking road. Those drones? What?
That's weird. Yeah, this thing is.
That's not a drone, dude.
We walked out here too, and we're like, I'm like, what is it?
Whoa.
Hey, look at the orb that's around it, dude. Like fucking like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And on top, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, bro, that's a UFO, bro. See how I move? It moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy, dude. He's probably flying it.
Come closer, dude.
It's coming closer, huh?
You can't hear them. Hey, those aren't helicopters. Go call Dad. Go call Dad, yeah?
Where did the other one go?
They're disappearing.
What's that? Did they get the binoculars? What? Did you get the binoculars? Oh, they disappeared.
Yeah.
It's not. I just checked flight radar. It's not a plane.
It's still going. It's dying.
Şu an yakınlaştırdım ama.
Görüyorsun değil mi?
Görünüyor kamerada. Öyle havada kalmış ışıklar.
Bir de havada kalmış ya.
Aha.
Nasıl bir şey?
İşte bir bilsem. Hadi uzaklaştırayım.
Bebeğim enteresan bir şey ya.
Öyle havada asılı kalmış.
Baksana ya. Şehir aşağıda, şehrin üstü.
Wait, hold on. Guys, this thing just got disconnected. Wait, no! It's over there. I can't see it now. This is a joke, right? Hold on. There it is. Alright, we're gonna watch it. Holy crap. I knew it! We're gonna get something, guys. Alright, let's watch it. Holy crap. Get a video. Take your phone out.
What is it?
Just get a good video of it. In case mine doesn't work.
It could be a personal drone, right? Or no?
I don't know. Bro, look! Come here! Look, bro.
I'm actually so drunk. The looks so.
You see, I wasn't lying to you, was I?
No, he wasn't, chat.
Look at this, guys. Oh my god. What is it doing there? You're recording the whole thing? Very good. Holy crap.
Hello everyone in the new video. Today we are going to talk about one of the best known UFO events from Poland. It is relatively unknown in the West as it took place during the communist times. We are going to go back in time to 1978 to a village called Emilcin in the Lubelskie region in Poland, which was saw an alleged meeting of a human being with extraterrestrial visitors. On the 10th of May 1978 at 7:30 hours in the morning, farmer Jan Wolski, who was a resident of Emilcin, was heading back home from the nearby village of Dąbrowa Puśnieńska, riding a horse-drawn carriage. On his way home, Wolski met two strangers who were short in stature and dressed in black overalls with hoods. These beings were reported to stand at approximately 4 feet 8 and 8 inches or 140 centimeters. The strangers approached Wolski talking in high-pitched and sharp tones and sounds. They reportedly jumped onto the carriage, apparently wanting a ride. Wolski's first impression was that the strangers were scouts dressed up and wearing strange costumes. However, as he looked at them more closely, he noticed that they had unusual facial features, a bit too sharp for a regular person. As they rode on, after about 300 yards or so, Wolski noticed a silver craft hovering several meters above the ground. As they approached the craft, a hatch opened and a staircase descended to the ground. The strangers hopped off the carriage and motioned Wolski to step into the craft, now accompanied by one more being atop the craft itself. Wolski tied his horse to a nearby tree and followed the beings inside. As they entered the craft, the farmer noticed several apparently paralyzed birds, possibly rooks or crows. Inside the craft, the farmer was asked to undergo a medical examination of sorts, after which he left the craft and bid farewell to the aliens. According to his own words, the entire event lasted approximately several minutes. The strangers were kind and smiled, and Wolski never felt anyhow threatened for even a second. After returning home, Jan Wolski told his sons about his strange encounter. The younger man in turn told the locals about the event, and soon enough a group followed to the meeting spot described by Wolski. However, the location itself was now empty, and all that was left were several foot imprints in the meadow. The residents of Emilcin, however, did not doubt the story presented by Wolski, who was generally considered to be a very reliable person by the neighbors, and someone who would never resort to pranks or otherwise telling false stories to the people he knew. The report provided by Wolski was soon corroborated by a local boy, a 6 years old Adam Popiołek, who also allegedly saw the craft described by Wolski. Both stories differed in slight details, but Adam reported that the craft appeared above the village center, where it was observed for a moment by him and his siblings playing there, and soon the craft rushed upwards with a tremendous roaring noise. Stanisław Plis, the commander of the local police station in Opole Lubelskie, arrived at the location of the encounter and also took a statement from Wolski. In his report, the police officer recorded that the farmer most likely fell asleep and the entire event was nothing but a very convincing dream. The Wolski family was also contacted by an amateur ufologist Witold Wawrzonek, who also informed Zbigniew Blania, a ufologist and a researcher of paranormal phenomena, about the event. Wolski and Blania met, and their talk convinced Wolski to undergo a medical examination as a precaution. During the talk, the farmer also mentioned that the encountered strangers were of short stature, resembled the Chinese people, and looked more like little gremlins rather than visitors from another world who looked vastly different than humans. The beings were also reportedly extremely heavy, as his carriage tilted under the weight. The craft which transported the beings was roughly parallel-piped in shape, and in Wolski's own words resembled a bus a little. In the corners of the craft there were rotating elements he called vortexes, and the craft let out a sound similar to that of a working transformer. In regards to the medical examinations he underwent, the visitors asked Wolski to undress and applied metal items similar to plates to his body. The items emitted clicking sounds now and then as they worked. An odd detail involved the strangers being fascinated by a belt buckle in the farmer's trousers. The alien beings also consumed some delicacy resembled ice cones. They also offered this to Wolski, who however refused the offer. At the end of the examination, Wolski dressed up again and bowed while bidding farewell to the strangers, who repeated the same gesture in response. The psychiatrist examining Wolski excluded the possibility that the farmer confabulated the story. Zbigniew Blania also presented the story to the media, and once it hit the media and became widely known, people came forward and reported their own meetings with the extraterrestrial visitors, one of which took place in Przyrownica in Łódzkie region and another in Golina in Greater Poland. Overall, however, the public remained largely skeptical to the reports presented in the media. The entire event was also presented in a documentary movie recorded in 1978 in Polish entitled A Visit, or At the Threshold of Mystery. Jan Wolski himself passed away 12 years after the event. He was 71 at the time of the event and remained convinced that he met the representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization until his dying breath. The Emilcin event was also the subject of a study conducted much later in 2012. The study was carried out by one Bartosz Rdutowski, a journalist. He concluded that the entire event was a hoax prepared by the aforementioned Witold Wawrzonek and was intended to discredit Zbigniew Blania as a ufologist. The gentlemen previously clashed during a TV show. According to this study, Wawrzonek was supposed to hypnotize Wolski and implant false memories in the farmer's psyche. Wawrzonek initially planned to admit the fraud, but once the event was announced in the media, he decided to keep the hoax a secret. Rdutowski also pointed out methodological errors by Blania, who approached the case with a conclusion already formed and tailored the studies to obtain a confirmation of his extraterrestrial hypothesis. The version of events presented by Rdutowski was, however, criticized by the Polish UFO community. The Emilcin event itself was commemorated with a monument erected in the village in 2005 by the Nautilus Foundation from Warsaw, which studies UFOs and which we can now see on the screen. The alleged meetings with representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization was also the subject of a comic by Grzegorz Rosiński titled The Visitors and published in issue 27 of the Relax magazine. The Emilcin event still remains one of the most important alleged encounters involving unidentified flying objects and purported extraterrestrial beings in Poland, as well as the potentially most important close encounter of the third kind in Poland, and the village itself is frequently visited by UFO fans and researchers. Local residents still say that the visit by the unknown craft was not just a one-off occasion, and that similar sightings are reported in the local area. I decided to add links to a video in which the local residents present their memories of Jan Wolski, as well as the video titled Return to Emilcin, recorded in 1995 and involving Witold Wawrzonek. The third video includes memories of an Emilcin resident regarding a UFO sighting above the monument commemorating the original event, which occurred in 2010. Unfortunately, the videos are in Polish, but I still decided to add the links to them for posterity. Another craft was observed over Emilchin in 2017 and the photograph was recorded. It is unfortunately quite blurry, but it indeed caught an object which, as you can see, roughly resembles the shape of the original craft described by Jan Wolski back in 1978. In the next video we are going to hit a lighter and a more casual tone. The video will be highly speculative in nature, as I am going to present various alleged extraterrestrial species or races described by experiencers who are persons reporting direct encounters with beings who are extraterrestrial or of different origin, perhaps inter or extra-dimensional. Until the next time, and keep looking up to the sky. Who knows what we are going to see there. Hello everyone. Yesterday saw the awaited and highly anticipated interview with Jacob Barber, a first-hand witness to UFO retrieval operations and a helicopter pilot who stated that he is coming forth as truth should not and cannot be barred from being known and that consciousness cannot be classified. With such intense statements and knowing Ross Coulthard as the person who had the groundbreaking interview with Dave Grush last year, 2 years ago, the whistleblower who told the world about non-human craft in the possession of the United States, this event could not be more hyped or anticipated. The video presented on NewsNation TV started off with the presentation of the whistleblower himself. As a former military and a military contractor, he worked in and as part of UFO retrieval operations. In October 2024, he provided information to the members of the Congress in Washington, D.C. He used to work in both official and unofficial capacity with programs involved in handling non-human technology and has known that non-human tech is recovered for over 10 years now. He has worked with the military since the tail end of the 1990s and has worked both for the DoD, US Air Force as a mechanic and for the intelligence services. He was recruited into combat control forces where he was trained as a paratrooper, martial artist and a helicopter pilot and was entrusted with top-end NATO security clearances. His story was corroborated by further former military personnel. Jake has participated in the operations covered by the video since after 9/11. As part of his testimony provided on the NewsNation TV station, a video from one of the retrieval operations was presented, filmed using night vision. It presented an egg-shaped object carried by a helicopter on a long sling and using what looked like a protective canvas. The object was reported to have no visible means of propulsion, no thermal signature, and so on. The object was approximately 20 feet or 6-ish meters wide, smooth and pearl white in color. It did not look like anything human-made. The object was later confirmed by members of the UAP task force to be of non-human origins behind the scenes. Given that the presented video was recorded using night vision, some of the viewers additionally claimed that the object is luminous, but let us see the actual recording now.
Let's slow this down to take a closer look. That's an egg-shaped UAP suspended from a 150-foot long line. We're told the craft is about 20 feet long. The egg suspended in a cradle. And look how careful the pilot is as they bring their precious cargo into land. Let's freeze frame here to look at one of the clearest images of a UAP ever taken. This is no blurry light in a distant sky. The source of the footage putting themselves at incredible risk to record this UAP retrieval. Look at how perfectly smooth the craft is. No markings at all, and no visible means of propulsion or way to see inside. Watch how it rolls, almost graceful as it hits the ground, despite being wrapped in the ropes and canvas from the cradle as it's dropped for pickup. The UAP's final destination still unknown.
In addition to the video, Jake claimed that at the site he called the range, he had seen other objects which exhibited anomalous characteristics, like unusual acceleration, shape reconfiguration, trans-medium capacity, just to name a few. Also, in addition to the already seen egg-shaped object, he was part of another retrieval operation, which was apparently a fairly regular occurrence. He also mentioned that he got as close as 150 feet or 50 meters to a UAP during one of his missions. Jake also mentioned an object he called an 8-gon, or possibly a flying disc with 8 delineated sections when looking down at it from above. He mentioned multiple such objects being retrieved during this particular operation. In preparation to transport the object, he experienced something extraordinary. At the pickup site, he was overwhelmed by emotions, with the emotions being stronger the closer to the object he was. It was a mixture of sadness, happiness, and beauty, a song, as he said. It was overpowering to the point Jake found himself unable to pilot the helicopter for a while. He even almost broke down on the screen telling the experience, as he mentioned, something tuning into his soul and offering some unspoken guidance and indicating to him the immense importance of all what he was doing. During the flight, Jake felt almost possessed by a loving spirit mixed with a sense of sadness. His retelling, including the feeling of a feminine energy and the spirit of God, reminded me very strongly of the experiences mentioned by Chris Bledsoe and his meeting with the being he calls the Lady. In other revelations, Jake mentioned that the US military employs teams of personnel with psionic abilities, who connect with the UAPs and are able to summon them, as per the story. The landed object was possibly invited to do so by such a team of psionic personnel. Such persons are used in the program and explore the idea of summoning, communicating with, controlling, and persuading UAPs to land. This could include the control of technology with mind powers. Take it as you will, the recollection touched quite heavily on the metaphysical side of the phenomenon. This was confirmed by another member of the military staff who knows and has worked with Jacob in the past. Another interesting part of the story covered injuries suffered by the staff participating in the retrieval operations while carrying a large container which was extremely valuable and had to be protected with the use of lethal force if required, with what seemed to be similar to burns and skin peeling off, as well as heart murmurs reported as the side effects. Such notions are confirmed by other reports and during the show by Dr. Gary Nolan from the Stanford University, who has carried research involving military personnel with atypical, if not anomalous, injuries. The final element, which sounds like something almost straight from a conspiracy theory, was the mention of the direct threat to life from the former employer of Jacobs. He was deployed as a part of team to recover high-value targets or tough books, special super sturdy computers and data they contained. Said units could include and contain data from ultra-secret UAP missions. The target for their mission was not exactly intact though, the computers were missing their hard drives. It turned out that said hard drives were found in a high-altitude lake, stored in a sealed bag 25 feet or 8 meters underwater. During the next operation, following this one, literal shots were fired at the team involved with the mission. You can see the entire video on the News Nation YouTube channel. A link to the video is provided in the comment section down below. The whole presentation was extremely hyped by both the TV station and the UFO community at large. Many people in said community say that the video has set the disclosure movement back, that there are egg-themed memes flying around and so on. While I personally see where this is coming from, and I wholeheartedly agree that the event was probably overhyped, but if true, the presented footage would indeed be the best publicly available film presenting a genuine UAP. In addition, I'll also consider the testimonies regarding working as part of secret military operations quite interesting and valuable in its own right. As always, I am here just to present and relay the news, leaving their assessment to you, dear viewers. What do you think of the new whistleblower and of the presented material? Let me know in the comment section down below. As this was not the only important event this weekend, in the next video, hopefully tomorrow, I am going to cover the multiple subreddit Ask Me Anything event with Leslie Keane, Hal Puthoff, Jim Segala and Gary Nolan, which also touched upon several topics important for ufology. Until then, stay warm, thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in a new video. Hello everyone, in this video we are finally touching upon the topic of giant UFOs. First, a disclaimer: while the reports I wanted to present today have come from as reliable witnesses as it gets, we sadly do not have actual evidence in terms of photos or videos, not in the least because at least some of those are classified, as we will soon learn. First, let's start with a report coming from none other than Lieutenant Ryan Graves, one of the 3 witnesses testifying before the US Congress during the memorable UAP hearing of July 2023. During said hearing, as well as during his interview with Jeffrey Nuzzetelli, who was the actual witness to said event. The event took place back in 2003 at Vandenberg Air Force Base located in California in the United States. During said event, the crew stationed at the base at the control tower received a call from the range control staff. 2 different reports were received of a giant red square floating above one of the sites at the base, as observed by the military contractors working there for Boeing. The object was described as almost flat plane with very little depth, square in shape and the size of a football field. So we are talking the object the size of about 100 yards or 90 meters in length or width. The object was observed floating over a launch pad at the site. The reports of the witnesses back then said that the object was glowing red, and people who were located close to it observed burn-like symptoms in the aftermath of the event. The UFO hovered there for a brief time before it left at speed, amazing for an object of this size. Speaking of UAP hearings, this year's congressional hearing saw the topic of USOs, or underwater objects, being mentioned, in particular by Admiral Tim Gallaudet and Luis Elizondo. The hearing included a report from a sea of an object the size of an oil rig, which means really colossal in size. We are talking several hundred yards or meters in diameter or a side length here. And it was not just the size that was astonishing, but also the speed of the object. It was moving underwater faster than any man-made craft would be able to, even with the state-of-the-art nuclear-based propulsion systems. Next, we move over to Mexico, a country which has quite the number of UFO sightings in general. Early this year, we had an interview with an airliner pilot who was flying over central Mexico at the turn of the year. He reported seeing an object which was partially clouded, if I recall correctly, which meant poor visibility and only partial opaqueness. And that was not the stranger part even. According to the report, the object was the size of a city, with its dimensions measured in kilometers. It also apparently moved at speed which could easily be expressed in thousands of kilometers per hour, with it traversing the Mexican landmass across the country in less than 2 minutes. The sighting was recorded near the city of Guadalajara, and the object was disc-shaped. On top of this, we have at least 2 major radar sightings of enormous UFO objects from Mexico as well. On the 1st of September 2020 and on 22nd June 2022, there were 2 major anomalies observed in the skies over the country by radar stations and were officially dubbed as weather phenomena. These sightings have been even possibly debunked as weather or radar anomalies as mentioned, but nonetheless contribute to the fame of Mexico as one of the countries which is a hotbed of anomalous activity, and a place relatively outspoken when it comes to UFOs compared to many other places around the globe. And still, many people believe that those gigantic observations were actual UFOs hovering over the country. The next case is often quoted as one of the most famous UFO sightings of all times. It involved the famous Japan Air 1628 flight en route to Alaska. According to the pilots who contacted the ground air traffic control, their flight was accompanied by a luminous object which maintained speeds similar to the airliner and maintained the same course as well. At some point, the object approached close enough as if wanting to study the airplane closer, and then Mr. Terauchi, a pilot with 29 years of experience, had the opportunity to estimate its size. It was apparently somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 3 aircraft carriers in length. So again, we are talking about object as big as more than half a mile, or almost a kilometer long in this case. With the object being spherical, you can imagine what kind of a surface area we are talking here as well. The next sighting involved the same aircraft carrier, USS Nimitz, which had an encounter with a giant UFO UAP in 1991. This story was told by the back then petty officer on board the ship, Mr. Kevin Thomas. He was responsible for processing photographs for the crew and remembered that one night when the ship went dark as per the procedures to hide it away from sight, With effective full lockout, he was locked out on the deck and saw a triangular object which was half risen from the water, silent and with water dripping off its surface. The object was approximately 200 yards away from the ship, and after rising to about 40 feet above the water surface, it practically vanished with tremendous speed. The object itself was about 200 to 300 yards longer than the Nimitz, which would place it at approximately 1300 to 1400 yards or 1200-ish meters long. So this is it for now in part 1, as I realized that the list of the objects is long enough to warrant 2 separate videos to make the content easier to digest and quite frankly to prepare as well. Stay tuned, as we are going to explore several more giant UFO sightings across the decades very soon. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you in another video. Take care. Hello everyone. In this video we are returning to the topic of the biggest UFO UAP objects ever observed. And to kick it off with a banger, let's take a look at one of the mass sightings, definitely in the top few in terms of both the size of the object observed and the number of people seeing it. The famous Phoenix Lights event. The Phoenix Lights event took place on 13th of March 1997 and involved a series of sightings which were observed over the states of Nevada and Arizona in the United States. The event involving various luminous objects lasted approximately 3 hours, from 7:30 to 10:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and covered a line running more or less 300 miles or 500 kilometers from Nevada over the city of Phoenix all the way to the edge of Tucson. The lights were first sighted over Henderson in Nevada close to 8 p.m. and were reported by a witness as a V-shaped object moving towards the southeast. Paulden in Arizona was next, with a sighting from a local police officer. The object, still reported as V-shaped, continued along its path and eventually reached the suburbs of Phoenix around 8:40 p.m. local time. Interestingly enough, one of the first persons to report the sighting of the large object from the air was none other than the actor Kurt Russell, who has a pilot license and was airborne at the time. In addition to the V-shaped object, many people also reported another sighting following the first one, with a series of more or less stationary lights which disappeared after a while. Some of the reports concerning the large object mentioned it being as large as even 1 mile or 1.6 kilometers in length. The authorities, including the then governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, initially dismissed the case as mass hysteria, but in an interview later on he admitted that at the time it was an orchestrated plot not to panic the populace, and he himself saw the object at the time. To date, Phoenix Lights remain one of the best known UFO sightings in history. Next, we are moving to Soviet Union, and the year is 1977. This particular event is known as the Pietrozavodsk phenomenon. It was a series of sightings observed on 20th September of that year, and the line of sighting was extremely long. Starting in Denmark, it ran over Finland and all the way to the city of Vladivostok in the far east of today's Russia. The main chain of sightings took place between 1 a.m. Universal Time in Karelia and Finland, as well as around 3 a.m. in Lithuania. Other locations involved the cities of Leningrad, Helsinki, and eventually the city of Pietrozavodsk. All the sightings reported a glowing object or perhaps different objects moving silently around the area. Observations in the Soviet Union reported bright luminous objects surrounded by an extended shell and emitting light rays or jets of various shapes. In Pietrozavodsk, the phenomenon was observed by many people, including the police, crews stationed in the local port, the military staff of the local airport, and an amateur astronomer. That particular sighting mentioned an object surrounded by a pulsing, glowing cloud and moving along with direction changes. The object or objects were also seen in the air, and sometimes reports of light spots covering them were also heard. As the Pietrozavodsk sighting had many witnesses with solid credentials, their reports were used to estimate the object as moving at an altitude between 6 and 7.5 kilometers, and the linear diameter of the core of the object varied in estimates from 60 to 120 meters, or from 185 to 370 feet. The entire phenomenon lasted between 10 and 15 minutes. On the 26th of January 1999, TV viewers in Chile were met by a sudden surprise. The Santiago station, more precisely the Televisión de la Universidad Católica on Channel 13, broadcasted video images from a satellite recorded in 1992, presenting what looked like a giant disc-shaped UFO. It was apparently an infrared photograph taken by a GOES 8 satellite over the Pacific Ocean, in the area located just west of the Chilean coast. According to a Chilean ufologist Luis Sanchez Perry, there were 3 images taken at 10-minute intervals, and the object was recorded very clearly. There was also an electromagnetic interference recorded preceding the object, and it is assumed that this particular disturbance was caused by the UFO itself. Sanchez and Chilean researchers analyzed this recording and eventually found another one of a very similar object recorded by a satellite in 1996, this time just off the east coast of Brazil over the Atlantic Ocean. The initial evaluation indicated that the disc-shaped UFO moved at the same speed as the geostationary satellite, so almost 6,700 miles or 10,700 kilometers per hour. The same study yielded the diameter of the colossal disk, which was approximately 400 kilometers wide, which would be probably something close to 250 miles. If true, this could be a possible alleged mothership of non-human origin. The town of Stephenville in Texas was the heart of a series of sightings between October 2007 and February 2008. The local residents have observed a large delta-shaped UFO in the area. The number of sightings included a chase of the mysterious object by F-16 jets, which took place on 8 January 2008, while the UFO was moving west from Dublin to Stephenville, with the story making it to the national news. The witnesses were numerous enough that an attempt was made at estimating the size of the giant triangular UFO. According to the reports, the object was somewhere around a mile or 17 football fields long, which hints at a size of approximately 1.6 to 1.7 kilometers. The object was also reported moving at enormous speeds, quite a feat given its size. The last of the giant sightings we are going to discuss in this video happened this year. In early 2024, Ukrainian soldiers fighting against Russia in the east of the country, and more precisely drone operators, recorded a giant object hovering in the distance. Upon zooming the camera image, they saw an enormous object of a slightly irregular shape suspended in the air. I have not found any estimates of its exact size, but given that some people trying to debunk the event said it may be a reflection of a ship from the Black Sea, for example, hint that whatever the object actually was, it must have been of a very substantial size. To this day, there is no explanation of what the drone operators actually saw that day in Ukraine. We have the footage, but the opinions are split as to the possible UAP recorded in it. That said, nobody provided a foolproof debunk of the sighting either, so for all intents and purposes it remains a UFO. Which of those sightings have you found the most compelling, dear viewers? Have you heard of other sightings of giant objects of unknown origins? If so, let me know in the comments. We can engage in a discussion, and who knows, maybe we will eventually enjoy part 3 to this mini-series. In the meantime, I am keeping a close eye on the ongoing drone situation developing in several countries as we speak. Hopefully this week brings us some clarification, and in the worst case scenario, more sightings. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you again in another video very soon indeed. Take care.
Personally meet a non-human intelligent being, what's the first question you would ask them about Earth or our species?
Who says I haven't?
This is...
Hello everyone. Recent weeks brought in some developments and statements which, according to some, hint at breakthrough progress in reverse engineering of non-human technology. Is there any truth to those statements though? To find the possible answer to the question, we have to look to the past first. By now we can say that events like Roswell, Magenta and Kingman, where UFO crashes had occurred and were later retrieved, are almost certain to have occurred. These would be some of the main sources of non-human technology in human possession. The mother of such suspicions is a rumored statement which came from the lips of Mr. Ben Rich, a Lockheed Martin engineer, who in 1993, during a speech to the alumni of the UCLA University, was supposed to have said, we already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine we already know how to do. Another version involving the same Ben Rich has him saying we now have the technology to take ET home. Given that Lockheed Martin is one of the prime contractors who are likely to be in possession of off-world technology, this statement alone seems to come from a natural source. But there are also counterclaims coming from people who have known Ben Rich and mentioned he never said anything like that. And in the case of most UFO-related lore, everything seems to be hidden in half-truths and shades of grey. I remember news circulating in the UFO community about 2 years ago, possibly fueled by one of the 4chan leaks, hinting that another success in reverse engineering of non-human technology was achieved in China. According to said rumors, the Chinese have been working on a mining laser of some kind, using recovered UAP materials. From the tidbits of information in circulation, it seemed that they managed to build a functional prototype, which unfortunately exploded during its first attempted use. This attempt was followed by another prototype, which was successfully operated, but failed after 2 seconds because of inefficient and inadequate energy sources used. Those who play space games, for example EVE Online, may have seen the futuristic mining technologies in action. A laser is fired at a rock, terrestrial or an asteroid, and the laser extracts the minerals and ore from the rocky material. The alleged Chinese technology is supposed to operate in exactly the same way from what I understand. This would be another example of successful reverse engineering. On the 9th of April this year, we heard a statement from none other than the President of the United States, Donald Trump. President Trump has indicated that the USA is in possession of a marvelous and terrifying new weapon, far surpassing anything any other nation on the planet has in their arsenal. This would confirm the rumors we have already heard, like Representative Burleson leaving a classified hearing, after which he mentioned some novel propulsion system being worked on, and some other rumors stating that there are works underway on a system capable of delivering a nuclear payload anywhere in the world between 30 and 120 seconds. More bombshell news were offered this month by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director Michael Kratsios, who said that we can manipulate time and space, and by that he seemed to mean more than small-scale quantum experiments carried out in laboratories. He mentioned things like annihilating distance, perhaps hinting at teleportation technology of sorts, and immense progress in the field of improving technology in general. Skeptics say that these statements are quite overblown and could very easily be interpreted in the area of what we could call classical or consensus science. Moreover, the wider context of statements coming from Michael Kratsios seems to indicate that he actually meant advances in the fields of AI, internet and cloud computing. But in the light of all the statements we have heard before in this video, perhaps there is a shadow of chance that there have been some breakthroughs in what the public is basically not told about. After all, it is a common knowledge that by now the cutting-edge military technology is usually anywhere between 3 and 5 decades ahead of what we use at home. What do you think, dear viewers? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you believe there are exotic technologies already operational, or is it all just hearsay and misinterpretations? Easter is now gone, and so is the period of being overwhelmed with work for me, so I hope the next video to finally be a bit longer one. We also heard from the task force under Representative Anna Paulina Luna that there is apparently another UAP hearing coming in the week of 12th May. Perhaps and hopefully there would be a witness or witnesses indicated by David Grosh himself. In any case, thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in another video. Take care. Hello everyone, in the last video dedicated to the observations of UFOs or UAPs as we call them, we analyzed factors which may facilitate the observations of exotic and unusual objects in the skies above, such as the time of the day, the location, and so on. In today's video we will focus on how to distinguish between a bona fide observation of an object which may be exotic in origin from ones which are prosaic. But before that, thank you for your support and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. It helps the channel a lot and spreads the knowledge on YouTube. In some of the past videos we have mentioned an office and organizational unit within the American Department of Defense Pentagon one named ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Protocol, with Lou Elizondo, the person instrumental behind the 2017 release of declassified UAP videos, at its helm. This unit, as well as to the STARS Academy, have devised the so-called 5 observables, sometimes also mentioned as 6 observables, which help us separate actual and unidentified objects from those which have a human technological explanation behind them. In terms of observations, the most important is probably the first of those observables, sudden and instantaneous acceleration. What does this mean for us? First and foremost, it can be translated to a characteristic observed by some in the behavior of the UFOs. Those objects seem to move very erratically across the skies, suddenly changing its direction without any apparent impact on inertia on them, execute sharp turns, often at a 19 degrees angle, with acceleration and g-forces which would be lethal to any human pilot on board. It is also often noticed that those objects can hover still in one location and then take off with enormous speed. In some observed instances, being able to move from just over the surface of water to about 30,000 feet in a fraction of a second. Some of those observations claim that the objects move even faster than light, but it is more likely that they simply move faster than the radar resolution or the recording ability. They definitely can and do exceed the sound barrier, sometimes by a factor of 10, of 100, or even more in extreme cases. We can listen to the testimony of Commander David Fravor during the 2023 UAP hearing before the American Congress here.
Did this object come up on radar or interfere with your radar or the USS Princeton?
The Princeton tracked it, the Nimitz tracked it, the E-2 tracked it. We never saw it on our radars. Our fire control radars never picked it up. The other airplane that took the video did get it on a radar. As soon as it tried to lock it, it jammed the radar, spit the lock, and he rapidly switched over to the targeting pod, which you can do in the F-18.
From what you saw that day and what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's none. There's no IR plume coming out, and Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visible signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no. Just on the performance, it would have just left in a split second.
The second observable is one we have already mentioned, hypersonic velocity. Those objects are able to move around faster than the speed of sound, sometimes exceeding it by a lot. Speeds as high as Mach 4 to 6 are observed regularly by pilots reporting meetings with UAPs in the air. The speeds seem to be largely independent of the size of the UAP in question. Even large craft seem to be able to achieve enormous speeds without any particular effort on their side. Examples of those speeds include the Nimitz encounter, not just with the specific Tic Tac objects David Fravor faced in the air. For several days, the crew of the carrier have observed unknown and unidentified craft dropping down close to the surface level of the ocean, only to pick back up and lift with enormous speeds as tracked by their radar equipment. Sometimes the objects also leave no signatures, no sonic boom or electromagnetic traces. The third observable is the one we have already covered in the first video on the subject in much more detail. It's low observability. UFOs are rarely seen and observed. Objects at night are sometimes more visible thanks to the lights emanated from them, while daily observations are more difficult by default. The white or silvery color of many of the UAPs also contributes to the poor observation rates. An extension of this particular observable enters the realm of hypotheses, with some people claiming that those objects are sometimes able to become visible out of thin air and equally vanishing in plain sight. This in turn could potentially suggest the use of some kind of an advanced cloaking mechanism. Even further goes the claim of people who have tried to take a photograph or a video of UAPs. Even in the era of digital equipment, this is an extremely difficult feat, sometimes bordering on the impossible. Some experiencers even claim that the objects are possibly able to shut down electronic equipment and prevent them from being recorded. This would also imply extensive jamming capabilities of the, let's call them, true UAPs. Some people claim that the objects cannot be actually observed and only their surroundings are perceptible in fact. People who operate on the sea and near lakes, whether in professional capacity as soldiers or simply being present at such locations for leisure and who have observed UAPs at such locale, mentioned the fourth observable. This is the transmedium travel. UAPs have been seen to enter water bodies, usually with no to little splash, differentiating them from regular objects impacting water surface. The objects have been seen entering and exiting water at will, with minimal apparent interaction with their surroundings. There are videos presenting purported UAPs not only able to do that, but also able to split as they do their transmedium tricks. Then again, we also have a tangentially related category of USOs, or unidentified submerged objects, which we are going to hopefully cover in one of the future videos. The objects are also seen moving between low altitudes at the edge of space, as we have already mentioned. The fifth observable is called positive lift. This means that the objects seem to defy the Earth's gravitational pull, which we have already largely covered, and do not experience inertia as usual. This is combined with the apparent lack of visible means of propulsion. There are no visible engines, wings, propellers, thrusters, jet engines, and other sources of motive power typical for our known technologies. This would suggest some advanced means of propulsion which we usually have devised on paper and in theory only, with potential practical solutions existing in the form of patents only, at least according to the publicly available knowledge. In addition to the 5 observables mentioned above, some add an optional 6th observable, one which is particularly difficult to observe, especially in combination with the craft. We have almost universally only the word of mouth of the experiencers in this case, with the other option being the alleged crash and retrieval operations involving potential biologics collected from the sites. One of the extremely rare cases in which the occupants or pilots may have been recorded involves the Kumburgaz sightings in Turkey from 2008. But the quality of the video recorded back then is unfortunately poor, and the claim that occupants of the UAP have been recorded, while convincing enough for some, is equally contested by the others. I hope that this brief summary of the observable characteristics of quote-unquote true UAPs and their sightings will help those interested in watching the skies for unusual objects. If you happen to notice one of them, you may consider reporting them to proper organizations such as Americans for Safe Aerospace, NUFORC, or their national equivalents if they exist in your country. We will definitely continue to explore the physics of UAPs, as the topic is extremely fascinating and is actually the subject of rare scientific studies carried out by the academia. Until then, thank you for watching, stay tuned and stay open-minded. The reality around us is much bigger than we usually think it to be. Hello everyone, in today's video we are going to take a look at another piece of the recent congressional hearing. One of its most important and definitely interest-piquing items was the report regarding the fabled Immaculate Constellation program. To kick off, I should probably mention here for the record that there is a controversy and a drama of sorts surrounding it. There are 2 versions of the documents, one with 11 and one with 12 pages, and the latter mentions that the document was presented and provided by Jeremy Corbell, whereas the official record has the witness Michael Schellenberger as the person who submitted the document to the Congress. But that little hitch aside, let us dig into the content itself. The introduction claims that the document is a result of a multi-year research and investigation regarding UAPs, technologies of unknown origins, and non-human intelligence using internal government data which is not available to the public. The author is allegedly a whistleblower who decided to publish the information via a journalist as the safest way of doing so while avoiding retaliation and possibly very harsh consequences. The document claims that the executive branch of the government has knowingly prevented the legislative branch from executing its proper powers over the aforementioned issues. It has also managed the issues without and outside the proper congressional oversight or authorization, and that the process has lasted several decades by now. On the other hand, there have been multiple whistleblowers who have provided the Congress with credible evidence demonstrating the reality of non-human intelligence and its technology. Section 1 presents an unacknowledged special access program dubbed Immaculate Constellation, which has not been correctly reported to the Congress. The main objective of the program is to collect imagery intelligence on UAPs and reproduction vehicles using tasked and untasked resources. It is also a part of a wider network of programs dedicated to non-human intelligence and UAP studies, while it acts as the central hub for activities, capabilities, and locations covering both sources of foreign and unknown origins. It covers all kinds of media from lower Earth orbit to ground observations. As part of its efforts, the program has been collecting imagery intelligence databases scattered within a fragmented structure, which complicates the very purpose it serves, while at the same time it provides compelling evidence for UAPs which cannot be explained with prosaic attributes. The imagery include infrared and FLIR material, full motion video, thermal and still photography. The following objects have been identified this way: a cuboid formation of approximately 12 metallic orbs skimming the ocean surface, exhibiting rapid maneuvers, braking formation, and moving with impressive capabilities. Another observation involved a fast mover object transiting over sensitive facilities, a small to medium oval UAP which rapidly comes into frame over coastal facilities and exhibits a rapid turn. Next, we have intelligence vessels about to collect their production vehicle at night within a specific area at the Pacific Ocean. This footage allegedly shows a triangular UAP appearing directly over the vessels. The UAP had the shape of a unilateral triangle with 3 bright points of light at each bottom corner of it, slowly rotating on its horizontal axis. The rotation partially revealed a horizontal bar of sweeping lights. Intelligence data shows that the vessels must have been aware of the UAP or RV and met it at the expected location. The UAP vanished as suddenly as it appeared. Another triangular UAP trailed an unwitting vessel is discussed. Again, we have an equilateral triangle-shaped UAP the size of a fighter jet, hovering approximately 200 meters above a sea vessel in the Pacific Ocean. The object was classified as an ARV or RV of intelligence networks have an infrared footage of a large saucer-shaped UAP craft emerging from a dense cloud formation. The saucer registered as a hot object against cold atmospheric background. The saucer was 200 to 400 meters in circumference and had symmetrical protuberations on the upper surface. It emerged at a shallow angle while moving upwards to higher atmospheric strata. After breaking the cloud cover, the object suddenly changed direction and partially entered the cloud cover again, exhibiting evasive behavior. Then we have a description of a boomerang-shaped UAP observed in a FLIR footage of the eastern coast of the USA. It rapidly decelerated and hovered as a stationary object. Then it suddenly emitted a light sphere from its central point, which expanded and partially engulfed the crowd in a rotating sphere of light. We also have a mention of a jellyfish-type objects crossing the US-Mexico border recorded in a FLIR footage. It exhibited cold and hot emissions and the shape of a flying brain or a jellyfish with hanging appendages. It flew against the wind, had no visible means of propulsion, and maintained an unnatural rigidity in its movements while flying at a low altitude above the ground. We have a mention of a supersonic range Fowler object intercepting a US Navy fighter jet off the eastern seaboard, with the object emerging from the clouds and approaching the fighter head-on at high speed, passing over the left side of the cockpit. Finally, we also have a mention of a tic-tac object detected by a space asset hovering near the local cloud cover without any reactions from the UAP, with the object tracked on purpose according to the report. Next, the document mentions human reports of first-hand encounters of anomalous objects as reported by the witnesses. There are records from 1991 all the way to 2022, and a list of craft types is provided, including spheres or orbs as the most frequently reported shape. from smooth to ones with visible appendages suggesting a wide range of technologies or functions. Discs and saucers with and without domes were the second most common reported form, together with flat saucers objects. Oval or tic-tac shaped objects were reported infrequently and only after approximately 2003, sometimes also exhibiting teardrop-like shapes. The tic-tac shapes sometimes have visible protuberances at the top or at the bottom of the craft. Triangles were the rarest of all observations in the data, and those were reported as equilateral isosceles triangles, sometimes with vertical stabilizers. The boomerang or arrowhead-shaped objects have a category of its own, followed by irregular or organic shapes, and those include the aforementioned jellyfish-type objects. Each of the categories also has a table providing a specification of their characteristics like size, speed, colors, signatures, and so on. The list of reports then provides specification of personal type reporting, from flight the crew through an F-22 fighter jet forced to land by a UAP formation to a sensitive facility breached by UAPs, not unlike the Langley Air Force Base report. We have the indication of bureaucratic reports indicating the OSAB and AT programs we know about in fair details thanks to Elizondo, as well as restricted historical records. The conclusion is the pinnacle of this document, though. It calls for disclosure and explains that those who are afraid of disclosure, or rather its consequences and impact onto the society, will never be able to predict the actual behavior of the populace in light of such a momentous announcements. It calls for the end to the authoritarian solutions and unnecessary secrecy, putting faith in the good present in human nature. Be not afraid echoes calls for whistleblowers to come forth. And the document ends with a Latin phrase, scientia igne probata veritas perfidem, which can be roughly translated as science tested by fire, truth by faith, as if outlining the way forward regarding the phenomenon. I have included a link to the actual document in the comment section below, and I would like to encourage you to read it. It's quite an interesting read, regardless of its veracity or lack thereof. I believe that most of the content, if not all of it, can be considered as legit, as they coincide with other reports floating around in the UFO community. And what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. In the next video, we will explore another topic touched by the last week's hearing, that of USOs, or underwater anomalous objects. It would seem that the unknown, possibly guided by the hand of non-human intelligence, roams not only in our airspace. Thank you very much for watching this one. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot to me and keeps the channel going. Take care, and I will see you soon in another video. Hello everyone. With the recent uptick of sightings of strange objects and conspiracy theories regarding UFOs floating around, upon which we will talk later on, I thought it may be a good idea to take a look at modern ufology and whether it is becoming a new doomsday cult. Firstly, what prompted me to talk about the topic? Perhaps you have heard, especially recently, about a guy named Cliff High. Cliff is the creator of the WebBot project, a software endeavor which started back in 1997. The bot was initially designed to track keywords and search trends on the internet. The collected data would then be used to predict the trends on the stock market and thus earn money. Later on, the software was further developed to predict future events. The creator himself claims to have predicted the Northeast blackout of 2003, the 2004 South Asia tsunami, and Hurricane Katrina. However, it failed in predictions of the dollar collapse of 2011, a 2008 earthquake near Vancouver, or a giant cataclysm in 2012. Recently, a claim concerning UFOs broke out and spiraled off into fame on TikTok. According to this claim, Cliff High seemed to have predicted back in 2007 that Donald Trump would be the president of the United States, which has happened, that Joe Rogan would have a podcast, which was also correct, and the two would have an interview in 2024. And this also happened. 39 days from that interview, there would be an expected battle or melee in the skies involving UFOs fighting UFOs with possible involvement of military airplanes. Do you see a pattern there, and especially in the light of the recent sightings? This was supposed to be a possible Black Swan event, not that far away in possible consequences from a doomsday event or catastrophic disclosure. Now, doomsday prophecies are usually associated with religions throughout the ages, aren't they? But is there a link between cults and religions and UFOs? Then there indeed is, and has been. Early cults like the I Am activity dating back to 1930s or Ethereal Society from the 1950s are the prototypes of such cults. Cults and religions which are better known to the public and are in one way or another related to UFOs and extraterrestrial or non-human entities include the Church of Scientology, Ashtar Galactic Command, Realism, or the Urantia movement. Other tangentially related systems of thought, though not necessarily religions as such, include channelings, known as the Law of One, delivered by a rumored non-human extra-dimensional entity called Ra, claiming to be the same as the Egyptian god Ra. Then we also have the infamous cult of Heaven's Gate, the followers of which must extinguish themselves in hopes for an alien rapture and salvation. How come there are religious overtones related to UFOs? This topic has been the subject of study by two respectable researchers, Professor of Religious Studies from the University of North Carolina, Diana Walsh-Pasulka, the author of books like American Cosmic, and Dr. Jacques Vallée, sometimes called the grandfather of the Internet, who has been studying the connections between folklore, animist religions, spiritual and religious experiences, and UFOs. Some of their claims of possible alien interventions include St. Francis of Assisi and his stigmata and the Miracle of the Sun event in Fatima in 1917. According to them, many of experiences which most people ascribe to various religions can be explained as easily, if not actually easier, through interactions with extraterrestrial or, speaking more broadly, non-human entities. If we combine this notion with the safe assumption that otherworldly visitors would be far more technologically advanced than we are, it is not too difficult to see that people may perceive aliens as godlike beings, nearly omnipotent and wiser than us. It turns out that these notions are actually running quite strongly in humanity. We could hear from whistleblowers coming forth in recent months and years that there are factions within the governments and within the military privy to classified knowledge related to UFOs and non-human entities who believe that these beings are angels, demons, and or anything in between. The same ideas echo within the wider UFO community at times. We can read reports from people who are experiencers as stating that alien beings are often our guides, orchestrating our spiritual development behind the curtains. We also hear that they feed off our emotions and both traumatic and positive experiences. One could also name here the supposed emotional energy called Lush by Robert Monroe. We also see some people who claim that aliens may have interfered with our evolution and are actively crafting hybrid beings for unknown, possibly nefarious purposes. If we take a look at the wider background of humanity in 2024, we live in quite the uncertain times. We have just emerged from a pandemic as a whole. There are many places around the world where there are active wars ongoing, persecutions of specific ethnic or religious groups. The unease triggers economic uncertainty and hardships, further fueling the spiral of fear, anxiety, and often hate towards one another. If we ask people about their feelings, many fear what the future holds for them. With that background in mind, it is easy to see why some look forward to the aliens as our saviors. With their rumored ability to switch off nuclear weapons, they could possibly be able to save us from the total annihilation of World War III. If they arrived and guided us to a better society and more spiritual lives, not to mention extremely advanced technology, it makes sense that there are people expecting their arrival, with far extremes including non-human beings harvesting us into a higher spiritual dimension or density, as we are told by the teachings of Ra mentioned before as one of the possible scenarios. We see humanity failing and wanting saviors coming from outside. The other end of the spectrum is driven by fear, from the rumored conspiracy of reptilians or their hybrids ruling the world in secret, through a possible looming alien invasion, as hinted by some people with military background in regards to the recent surge in sightings over military installations as reconnaissance activity, to aliens treating us like herd and recycling our souls in the cycle of reincarnation so they can feed off our spiritual energy or lush, often with a hint stating that suffering, fear and trauma are the most valuable of such sustenance. Here is where I reached the conclusion. While ufology in itself is not a doomsday cult, and definitely not yet, such tones in it are definitely on the rise. The uncertainty of current times, the ever-present gloom and fear presented by the media, and the resulting doom-scrolling practiced by so many find their reflection in ufology as well. Many of us feel we are hanging by a thread on a precipice, and it is difficult to imagine an event shaking things up more than the arrival of aliens. We also naturally tend to think that advanced beings should also be more peaceful and wiser than we are. They become the modern incarnation of hope in this scenario. I hope you find this video a bit more of the usual topics I cover on this channel interesting and as a thought provocation perhaps. While I focus and continue to do so on the more physical nuts and bolts aspects of the phenomenon, there is a strong connection to our spirituality, consciousness and possibly religious beliefs, ontology and eschatology if you will when it comes to UFOs. Perhaps one day we will learn the true nature of the phenomenon and that of ourselves. In the meantime, I am also hoping to release another video this weekend, trying to cover the events currently unfolding in the northeastern United States, especially in New Jersey, where there are high numbers of sightings of unusual objects in the skies. Until then, take care, thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in another video. Hello everyone. In this video we are taking a look at an interesting piece of UFO news that dropped over the course of the last 2 weeks. This time we had news coming from none other than the investigative UFO journalist Jeremy Corbell, who already presented the world the now famous jellyfish UAP video recorded over a military base in Iraq in 2018. This time we are presented a video also recorded using what looks like some kind of a military system. The video, which we'll see on the screen in a moment, depicts a tic-tac shaped object, which does seem to exhibit some anomalous characteristics, quite likely falling into the 5 observables territory. At least to me, the object does not move like any obvious human-made aircraft.
Deploy the VVSS team.
Is that like 22,000 feet? That shit took off earlier.
Deploy the VVSS team.
Is that like 22,000 feet? That shit took off earlier.
We got additional information regarding the video provided as well. We were told that this video was indeed recorded by members of the military in 2023. The recording comes from an area off the west coast of California, so roughly from the same area where the well-known Nimitz encounter, also with a tic-tac shaped object, took place in 2004. According to the provided information, the military observed 4 objects with the tic-tac shape, which emerged from the ocean, thus exhibiting transmedium properties. Next, the objects flew in a formation and all of them executed the same maneuvers, which is a strong hint at some kind of coordination and an intelligent control system behind them. After hovering and flying around in the vicinity of the observation, the objects then took off with tremendous speed. Their speed was so high that the observers were almost unable to determine the direction in which the objects departed. Some new information was provided on 15th April by the channel Red Panda Koala, who talked with a Navy veteran named Alex Wiggins. He described the night when the US Navy vessel USS Jackson witnessed the tic-tac UFOs in question. He mentioned that the objects, when leaving the area at such an insane speed, made no noise and no sonic boom was heard, hinting at some anomalous or exotic propulsion system in use. The description related what happened after the video ended. There was a radar observation of the objects as well, first one, then two, and eventually all four of them. Alex Wiggins named the speed of the objects as 2 steps behind instantaneous, no ripple effect on the water, no gust of wind, no effect on the environment. He mentioned that with a conventional object taking off at such a speed, everyone watching the objects would feel the shockwave of the departure. What do you think of the objects in the video, dear viewers? Let me know in the comment section down below. I myself am fascinated by the video, and to me, this is the best sighting coming in from a non-public source using high-grade military equipment to have it recorded in recent times. Combined with the jellyfish video, it makes me wonder about the trove of treasures that Jeremy Corbell is sitting on. That's it for today. I am on the lookout for more exciting news from the UFO world, and things are happening as we speak, so expect another video about that soon. So I will be back with another news video sometime, probably next week. Thank you all for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you soon in the next video. Take care! Hello everyone! In this video we are going to discuss an intriguing case which is a staple of the UFO lore on the one hand, and while on the other I believe it has never gained the attention and acknowledgement it really deserves. We are visiting the Kumburgas UFO case. This event, or rather a series of events we are going to talk about today, covered the time span from 2007 to 2009, and it took place in the northwest of Turkey. The heart of the sightings was the town of Kumburgas, even if some of the sightings and UFOs were seen as far as in the biggest Turkish city, the famous Istanbul. The local residents have observed a series of strange objects over the sea. The objects in question had the shape of discs and ovals with a metallic appearance to them, and were seen hovering above the sea and maneuvering silently, but sometimes they were also accompanied by strange red and orange lights. Some of the people who have witnessed the events were local fishers, and some lived in the nearby housing complex overlooking the seashore. The initial sightings, dating back to 2007, were recorded with and filed with Serious UFO and Space Science Research Group, which is the main UFO reporting body in Turkey. And since the activity continued over a long period of time, it gained the attention of the local and national Turkish media and was mentioned even on the CNN in the USA. Thanks to the intensity and frequency of the sightings and the fairly high population density in the local area, people living in and around Kumburgas started filming the objects as early as the first waves in 2007. However, the main person who was propelled to what could be dubbed UFO stardom was Mr. Yeltsin Yalman. He was an experiencer himself, and he remembers a sighting dating back to when he was a child and was fishing with his father. They saw 3 unknown objects hovering in the sky above them. Years later, following the 2007 sightings, he purchased a camera and was the key person who filmed and took photos of the 2008 wave of sightings, as he became involved in skywatching at the time. The best recorded 2008 wave spanned over a period of several months, from 22nd of May to 28th of September, when anomalous aerial objects were sighted again in the local area. Mr. Yeltsin, whom we have already mentioned, worked at the local facility called Yenikend at the time, during night shifts, which allowed him to record his material. The recordings we are going to see now were taken on 8th of June. The material seems to show an object observed just before 4 AM, and when zoomed in on, it shows a lenticular-shaped object or craft with what looks like a dent or a dome in the middle and is possibly transparent. The next day, the 9th of June, saw a glowing ball of orange or red plasma hovering in the sky for several minutes, including a bright reflection of its light on the water surface. The 12th of June was another day of sightings, and again we can see a craft recorded that day. The shape of the object is again lenticular or saucer-like, though this time there is no obvious dome or compartment in the middle of the craft, and the sighting took place slightly earlier, after 2 AM. A similar oblong-shaped craft was recorded also on the 2nd July, roughly in the same area, hovering above the water surface. Yeltsin managed to zoom in on the object several times during his recording, and that was just before 4 AM. After 5 AM, with the dawn already around, there was another sighting of what seemed like the cluster of lights hovering above the water surface. we can again see the reflection of the craft's or object's light on the water. One more similar sighting of a cluster of lights above the sea was filmed on the 16th of June the same year. The collected material, including that filmed by Mr. Yeltsin, was sent to the aforementioned Sirius UFO Center. There, a researcher named Haktan Akdogan, the director of the center himself, analyzed the videos. He also conducted interviews with the local residents in Kumburgaz. Having analyzed the pictures frame by frame, zoomed and at scale, tracing the frames pixel by pixel, the center found no evidence of any tampering with the video material, thus excluding computer-generated content, hoaxes, mock-ups, and so on. The UFO Center has excluded the objects as being planes, helicopters, meteors, planetary sightings, satellites, Chinese lanterns, weather balloons, and other usual culprits of possible UFO sightings reported everywhere. Another sighting occurred in 2009, this time during the International UFO Congress held that year in Istanbul. The onlookers watched a ball of light maneuvering near the cloud level. More unknown objects were observed that night as the sightings continued all through the night and into the morning of May the 15th. The distance to the objects seen over the Sea of Marmara, as calculated from the vantage point, was estimated to be in the range of 44 to anywhere between 58 and 91 nautical miles. The 2008 sightings were also a subject of an interview by Roger Lear, an American ufologist, and later discussed during the famous Coast to Coast AM radio show with the veteran UFO and investigative journalist George Knapp. One more video, which was analyzed in such detail, was recorded during the first wave in 2007. It included a collage of recordings from the period between 20th June and the 31st of August. The filmed objects involved round, disc-shaped ones and oval-shaped craft flying over the sea surface and changing directions.